Sup folks, welcome to the part 9, of What If Deku Become a Healer Hero, Chapter 23. Brushing sushi's fur has always been a relaxing activity for Izuku. Sushi enjoys it, and the rhythmic motions of it is something easy for Izuku to focus on. He doesn't have to think about anything else other than brushing out clumpy areas and helping Sushi with those hard-to-reach places. That weekend, Izuku brushes Sushi's fur so much that he can practically create another cat with the amount of hairballs his brush gathers. Eventually, Sushi tires of the constant grooming and fleas. Izuku then turns his attention to his own hair. He spends almost 20 minutes in the shower just scrubbing and lathering every inch of it in conditioner. Then, he sits on his bed and starts combing his still wet curls. They reach almost halfway down his back at this point, only a few inches above his elbows, and they're in a sorry state. He's been so busy with school and recovery girls' lessons and homework and studying that he hasn't been taking very good care of his hair. But now, he spends nearly 40 minutes dutifully brushing out his wavy curls while All Might calls him on the phone. They talk about absolutely nothing for the entirety of the 40 minutes, just making idle conversation while Izuku carefully untangles knots and smooths them out. Once he's done, he pats them dry with a towel and bids All Might goodbye. If Kaken notices a difference when he comes over, he doesn't say anything. He does, however, vehemently refuse to let the greenette touch his spiky hair. Izuku merely pouts before offering to brush and style his mother's hair. Inko agrees and the three of them sit on the couch and watch TV while Izuku starts on her long locks. It's his way of coping, he supposes. Simple, mindless work. It keeps him busy, keeps him from thinking about what happened to Kendu. He knows he probably should be studying, since finals are starting on Monday, but when he tried to crack open a book, he found his mind wandering back to the incident. So studying is out. He's done enough of it during the past couple of weeks that he feels confident in his ability to do well on the exams anyways. Kaken is watching him, always. Watching for something. He doesn't know what. A moment of weakness, perhaps. Waiting for him to drown again so that he can be the one to bring him back to the surface. But Izuku won't drown again. He doesn't need to. He already had his moment of weakness, and Majiki no Tamaki helped him through it. So he doesn't need to do that again. It doesn't even hurt that badly, looking back. He just doesn't want to think about it, and that's fine. He will accept the cuddles, though. The stench of blood is faint now, more of a memory than anything, but Izuku is more than happy to drink in Kaken's burnt sugar scent as they lie on the couch together while Inko makes dinner. There's no mindless work involved in cuddling, but Izuku finds that listening to Kaken's strong heartbeat is enough of a focus for him. He remains steady. He doesn't break again. He thinks he might the next day when Kendu shows up at his house. Her parents are with her, and they all bow and thank him profusely for what he did. For saving her life, Kendu hugs him tightly and calls him her hero, and he doesn't know how to respond. Ashido called him that too and his classmates agreed with her. Izuku isn't quite so sure. He supposes, technically, that he is one. Heroes are all about saving lives, aren't they? He did that. He saved someone's life. For some reason, he thought saving a life would feel better, feel more heroic. But whenever he thinks about what he did, what he should be proud of, all he feels is nauseous. He hopes that'll change one day. Kendu is all better now, thanks to Recovery Girl. She's a little weak, but the surgery went well and her leg is fine. She shouldn't have any trouble during the practical portion of her final exam later in the week. Izuku is glad. Once she leaves, he feels a little better, a little lighter. At least now whenever his mind wanders back to the incident, to her cold, still form, he can remind himself that he just saw her alive and well. She's fine and so is he, so everything's fine. He's grateful to go back to school on Monday, even if it is just to take tests all day. Being around his friends makes him feel better, kind of like things are going back to normal. Ashido squeals, and fawns over his better-than-normal-looking curls, causing the other girls to join in and start up a surprisingly in-depth conversation about hair care. Kaminari does something silly and dorky during lunch that they should all be used to by now, but it still makes them laugh until they feel sick. Todoroki is a strong and steady presence by his side while Ida fusses and makes sure that they both have everything they need for their next class, which is really just a pencil and maybe an eraser. He still kicks Shinsu's ass during training, but the taller boy's attacks are steadily becoming more difficult to avoid. He makes sure to tell Shinsu this and smiles at the determined, hopeful gleam in his eyes. There's not many people getting injured during finals week, so he doesn't get as much practice with his quirk as he would like, but whenever he does get to use it he's fairly successful in slowing the energy to a stop. It still fills him with pride every time he does so. The only thing that's really different is that Class 1B is more openly friendly towards him. It's nice, even though his stomach churns every time he looks at Kendo. It's the main reason he politely turns down their invitations to join them for lunch, although he really does just prefer to sit with his own friends. But other than that and the passing greetings he now gets from Class B students in the hallways, not much changes. Soon, the 3 days of written tests are over and it's time for the practical portion. Ashido and Kaminari had tried to wring information about the exam out of Izuku, certain that recovery girl had told him something which she hadn't, but eventually they got word from Kendo that the practical will involve fighting robots like in the entrance exam. So, pretty much everyone is feeling confident as they change into their costumes and take a bus over to the practical exam area. Everyone except for Izuku, who still has no idea what he's going to be doing. Obviously he won't be fighting robots, but will he just be healing his classmates? He does that basically every day. Surely something will be different? Recovery girl already gave him a written exam the previous day that was fairly difficult but all in all manageable. So what's next? He gets his answer soon. Everyone is surprised when a large group of teachers meet them in front of the exam building. They're even more surprised when Principal Nezu pops out of Aizawa's scarf and cheerfully informs them that, thanks to the recent increase in villain activity, they will be participating in real-life battle simulations. Which means that the students will be fighting the teachers. Barely trained teenagers versus grown and experienced pro heroes. Izuku gets the feeling that Recovery Girl is far from pleased with this plan. To make matters even worse, Kaken and Todoroki are tasked with defeating All Might together. Which Izuku can think of a million reasons why that is such a bad idea. Anyone with 2 eyes and half a brain can see that the two don't get along at all, especially after Kaken lost to Todoroki during the sports festival. Why didn't the teachers pair him up with someone that he can actually work with, like Kirishima? And poor Kaminari and Ashido against Principal Nezu. What on earth were the teachers thinking? Assuming you come across the enemy, Snipe says, if you think you can win a fight against them, then that's fine. However, in cases where there's too big a difference in your abilities, it would be smarter to run away and get help. Aizawa narrows his eyes. Todoroki-kun, Ida-kun, Midoriya-kun. I'm sure you three understand this well. Izuku shrinks slightly. Of course he's referring to Stain. The difference in abilities between the hero killer and Ida and Todoroki was big, but Izuku doesn't even have a combative quirk and he still ran towards the fight instead of away from it. And yeah, maybe things turned out well this time, but still, you're not a fighter, you're a healer. Your place isn't on the battlefield. Izuku's jaw clenches. That's right, All Might says, standing in front of Todoroki and Kaken, your decision-making skills are being tested. But with these rules, you're probably thinking the only choice is to run, right? Oh please do, Izuku thinks. He can't imagine how injured his two friends will be after a fight against All Might. But despite how unfair of a fight it is, he knows Kaken won't even think about running away. And Todoroki can be stubborn too. These handicaps don't make him feel any better, either. Those waiting their turn can watch the exams or think of strategies as a team, Aizawa says as the rest of the teachers make their way into the building, Do what you want. That is all, Midoriya-kun, come with me. He turns away. Gulping, Izuku starts walking after him. Looking over his shoulder, he sees his classmates start to formulate plans with their teammates. Todoroki glances at Kaken and says something in a low voice, but Kaken just snarls and ignores him. Todoroki doesn't try talking to him again. Midoriya-kun. Coming. Aizawa watches him as he hastily trots over to the man's side. Don't worry about them, he grunts, continuing to walk, just focus on your job today. Laughing nervously, Izuku asks a bit cheekily, isn't it my job to worry about them? Aizawa gives him a look and he quickly averts his gaze. Never mind. I mean, what will I be doing then? Aizawa sniffs. These exams will no doubt result in injuries. Your test will be to He-law, injuries only halfway, meaning you have to stop your quirk every time you're unable to. 5 points will be taken away. Izuku is suddenly a lot more nervous. But I only just figured out how to do that last week. Then work hard, Aizawa replies with no remorse. He glances away. You'll do fine. Easy for him to say. Well, at least worrying about his own exam takes his mind off of Kaken and Todoroki's predicament. He meets with Recovery Girl in the monitor room, who laments at the amount of work they'll have today. As they watch Sato and Kirishima's test begin, Izuku doesn't notice the doors behind him open. Midoriya. Izuku glances over his shoulder. Todoroki-kun. You came to watch? Todoroki nods, coming to stand beside him. I figured seeing the students and teachers fight might give me some ideas. Ah, right, Izuku says, wincing, in pity. All Might will be a challenging opponent. Todoroki's face doesn't change except for the slightest narrowing of eyes. Bukagu's attitude won't help either. It's a close growl. The line of his shoulders is tense too, revealing his frustration. Todoroki looks at him. I also came here to ask if you have any suggestions on how to deal with him, seeing as you know him best. Izuku hesitates. Honestly, this is really a terrible situation for them. Kaken views All Might as the best of the best, the person that Kaken has to beat so that he can become the strongest hero. But he also feels intimidated by Todoroki, who he's already lost to twice and whose unmistakable strength he'll have to confront once more during this test. In the face of two overwhelming powerhouses, his insecurities will no doubt be heightened. Honestly, Izuku can't really imagine his friend passing this test. He most certainly won't willingly work with Todoroki, in any case. Thankfully, Recovery Girl saves him from answering. Don't try getting any help from him, boy, she says, not taking her eyes off the screen. That is for you to figure out. Heroes occasionally have to work with people that they normally wouldn't get along with. Consider this preparation for that. Todoroki looks a bit disgruntled, but nods. Izuku feels like he should at least say something to him, but he's distracted when Sypnosis announces Kirishima and Sato's failure. Eyes widening in surprise, he whips his head back to the screens to see the two boys unconscious on the floor. Recovery Girl tuts. Oh dear. It's only the first match and we already have work? She doesn't seem particularly regretful, though. Oh well, let's go Midoriya-kun. Your test begins now. Izuku swallows. Todoroki gives him a small smile of encouragement as he nervously follows Recovery Girl out of the monitor room. Kirishima and Sato are brought to them on stretchers by a couple of robots so they don't have to walk all the way down to the arena. Under Recovery Girl's supervision, he goes through the motions of analyzing their physical well-being before he takes off his gloves to use his quirk on Kirishima. He's been mostly successful so far in slowing the energy to a stop during these past couple of weeks, but his nerves are getting to him now. Thankfully, he does manage to shut off his quirk, however it takes just a little bit too long. By the time he succeeds in narrowing his metaphorical hose enough to stem the flow of energy, Kirishima's injuries are about 70% healed rather than 50%. To his relief, he does a slightly better job with Sato. That's pretty much how the rest of his test goes. He watches his classmates' matches in the monitor room and tends to their injuries when he needs to. It goes well. For the most part he doesn't manage to stop his quirk when healing Asui and later Aoyama, but that's mostly because their injuries were so minimal that Izuku didn't even have time to slow down his quirk before they healed. Unsurprisingly, the ones with the worst injuries are the ones who failed their exams. The teachers all come out relatively unscathed, although Izuku has a feeling that's going to change soon. Saving the best for last, Kaken and Todoroki's match against All Might is the final one for the day. At this point, most of Izuku's classmates and teachers have gathered in the monitor room. Having people around was a bit annoying at first, but they gladly shut up when Recovery Girl ordered them to so he could focus on healing. Now he's grateful that he can't cling to Ida's arm as he anxiously watches the screens with wide eyes. The blue-haired boy simply pats his back reassuringly. "There's no need to worry, Midoriya-kun," he says. "We both know how intelligent Todoroki-kun is. I'm sure he's managed to talk some sense into Bakugo-kun. And if not, well..." He trails off uncertainly. Izuku stifles a sigh. While he has no doubt that Todoroki understands the need for partnership when it comes to fighting against powerful adversaries like All Might, at the end of the day he's still a bit of a lone wolf, just like Kaken. If he's already failed to communicate with the blonde ones, Izuku doubts that he'll waste time trying again. Struggling to swallow past the hard knot of anxiety that has formed in his throat, Izuku gazes at the figures of his two friends on the bright screens. His eyes land on Kaken, watching as the blonde tosses a withering glare at Todoroki over his shoulder before continuing to ignore him, and his stomach sinks. "Please," he mentally begs, "don't do anything stupid." Team Todoroki and Bakugo, practical exam. Ready? Go. Icy hot. Katsuki is up against All Might, finally getting his chance to test his strength against the best of the best, and he's paired with freaking icy hot. Fan-fucking-tastic. At least the two-toned bastard seems to be as displeased about the situation as he is. He does make an attempt to communicate with him after the teachers dismiss them to prepare for their exams, but he takes the hint pretty quickly once Katsuki snarls at him. Now they're both set on simply ignoring each other as hard as they can. Fine by him. He doesn't need that bastard shitty-ass quirk in order to pass. He'll beat All Might with his own damn strength. Unfortunate partnering aside, Katsuki could not be more thrilled about the teacher he was chosen to fight. Finally he really gets to go all out and prove his strength to these fuckers, to truly put his power to the test and become better than the best icy hot. Just needs to stay out of his way. He knows the bastard is aiming to be number 1 too, so he'll no doubt be trying to beat All Might with everything he's got as well. But there's no way in hell Katsuki is going to let him win again. Icy Hot made a fool out of him for the last time during the sports festival, and now more than ever Katsuki is filled with an overwhelming drive to beat his ass and seize an indisputable victory, to finally stake his claim as the strongest in the class and knock Icy Hot off the high horse that he's been on for far too long. Curling his lip, Katsuki welcomes the familiar burn of rage in his chest as he casts a glare at the other boy, who is still ignoring him. They both have their eye on the same prize. If Icy Hot does get in his way while he's beating up All Might, would he be allowed to blow him to high heaven? Probably not. Looks like he'll just have to find and take down Might before him. Team Todoroki and Bakugo, practical exam. Ready? Go. Katsuki immediately turns and begins striding into the makeshift city confidently, feeling a small spark of pleasure when he hears footsteps walking in the opposite direction behind him. No need to worry about Icy Hot tailing him then. Now it's just a competition to see who can find All Might first. Ideally, he would have liked to tire All Might out a bit first, toy with him until the 30 minutes are almost up, then catch him off guard with a howitzer impact when he's tired, but he can't risk Icy Hot fighting All Might during that time and stealing his victory right out from under his nose, so he'll just have to fight him head on. Those handicaps that support student made supposedly should help weaken him slightly, but Katsuki shouldn't count on that. And he shouldn't want to. This is a test in more ways than one, isn't it? If he can be the goddamn #1 hero, then all those losses before will be what he thought they were, flukes, just little mishaps, and he can be the best, the strongest once again. With determination filling his veins, Katsuki turns his stride into a jog as he begins his search for All Might. The buildings are tall around him, the city quiet except for Icy Hot's fading footsteps. If Katsuki remembers the map correctly, the gate is directly on the other side of the city, a straight cut through from their point, and he bets All Might is probably near. There a huge blast of wind pressure suddenly rips through the testing facility, shattering windows and making the ground shudder. The force of it has him flying backwards and landing painfully on the ground, rolling to a stop. Who gives a damn about damaging the city? Katsuki's head whips up at All Might's booming voice, but he can't see the hero amongst the thick cloud of dust still clearing up. If you think of this as an exam, you'll be sorry, All Might says in an intimidating tone, and Katsuki finds himself tensing up. I am a villain, heroes. Come at me with everything you've got. The dust is clearing, but he still can't see All Might. His voice sounds like it's farther away though, on the other street, damn it, back where he just came from. Katsuki dashes back over, cutting through an alley to get there quicker, but by the time he reaches the now destroyed street, All Might is gone. A moment later, he hears the distinct sound of ice shattering and his heart leaps to his throat. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Following his ears, Katsuki furiously chases after the rapidly repeating sound as he tears his way down the street until he turns the corner and a block of ice comes hurtling towards his face. Instinctively, he lifts his hand and releases an explosion, blasting it into smaller pieces that clatter onto the concrete harmlessly. Oi, half-face, what the? Katsuki cuts himself off. Icy Hot is currently getting his ass handed to him on a silver platter. Katsuki gawks as All Might dodges his attempts to freeze him to the spot, seemingly moving in the blink of an eye before darting into attack before Icy Hot can hardly even react. He smashes through each ice wall the boy throws up in self-defense like they're made of glass, giant blocks breaking off and flying everywhere as he does so. Icy Hot scrambles backwards, creating ice wall after ice wall as he goes on the complete defensive, but All Might lunges forward, breaking through 2 sheets of ice in one punch and grabbing Icy Hot's face in his massive hand before dragging him back through the crumbling hole he created. In one swift movement, he turns and hurls him all the way across the street where Icy Hot makes a very painful-looking crater in the side of one of the buildings. Then, All Might turns to him with a wicked grin. Finally joining us, young Rikugu? Katsuki shakes out of his stunned stupor and peels his lips back into a snarl, shifting into a fighting stance. As All Might lunges towards him, he lifts his gauntlet and fires off a stun grenade. With the hero briefly blinded by the bright light, Katsuki launches himself into the air and prepares to aim an explosion at him, only for the same massive hand that grabbed Icy Hot's face to suddenly dart out and grab his, stopping him midair. He grunts in shock, but continues aiming explosion after explosion at All Might's exposed face until the man turns and slams him into the ground. Katsuki lets out a choked gasp as pain ricochets throughout his body. Come on now, that was just a sting. All Might's voice cuts through the ringing in his ears. Show me what real heroes are made of, you zygotes. Katsuki didn't realize he was casting a shadow over him, until he's gone, and as he painfully struggles to roll onto his side, he hears the sound of ice crackling once more and looks up. All Might is already across the street and in front of Icy Hot, swiftly dodging a series of icy daggers shooting up from the ground as he advances on the boy, but suddenly, Icy Hot switches to using his fire to defend himself from All Might's next attack. Katsuki is surprised Icy Hot hardly ever uses his fire, for whatever fucking reason. In fact, their fight during the sports festival is the only time he's ever seen him use it. The #1 hero clearly isn't expecting it either, and his hand actually gets a little burned, but he quickly shakes it off and sends Icy Hot flying across the street with a swift punch to the ribs. While he's distracted with him, Katsuki struggles to his feet and propels himself towards All Might again. All Might turns, jumps, and then suddenly he's right in front of him and his fist is driving right into Katsuki's abdomen. Pain explodes and the blonde immediately vomits, expelling the contents of his stomach right before he's sent flying backwards. He lands, skids to a stop, and doesn't move. For a few, unbearably long, moments, the pain is paralyzing, and he struggles to gasp for the breath that has been knocked out of him. Heavy footsteps approach and he wheezes, gritting his teeth in frustration. Damn it. Get the fuck back up. Growling, he ignores the way his muscles scream at him and presses his palms against the ground. I know why you're so frustrated, All Might's voice says beside him as he slowly and shakily pushes himself up onto his knees. It's because of young Todoroki's strength, isn't it? Katsuki's eye twitches. You must know that everyone starts at different levels. Rather than feeling threatened by his strength, why don't you focus on improving your own? You have so much more room to grow. And I'm not just talking about power. Shut up, All Might, Katsuki hisses, shoulders hunched. If I have to get help from that. He abruptly trails off as he looks up to the side. Icy Hot is up and running again, but he's running away. He's utilizing All Might's distraction with Katsuki to flee. Katsuki's eyes widen. And something in him snaps. His lip curls, and he suddenly finds his blood burning hotter than ever before, like a bucket of hot acid has just been poured straight into his veins. Strength? He barks. Strength? What fucking strength? There's not an ounce of strength in the body of that fucking coward. His voice rises into a screech before he whips around and aims both of his palms at All Might, releasing his rage in a massive explosion that has the #1 hero actually taking a step back. He raises his forearms to protect himself, and for a brief moment, Katsuki feels a flicker of hope in his chest, baring his teeth savagely as he continues the relentless assault. But a second later, All Might is jumping out of his range of fire, moving faster than his eyes can see, and then there's a giant hand grabbing him by one of his gauntlets and he's being lifted into the air. Now that's no way to talk about your teammate. All Might says disapprovingly as Katsuki snarls and thrashes around. He raises his other hand to blow his face up, only to let out a cry of pain when All Might crushes the gauntlet he has in his grasp like it's made of tinfoil, making the metal dig into the skin of his wrist. Whether you like it or not, you two are in this together. At the last word, he reels his arm back and hurls Katsuki all the way down the street right towards Icy Hot. Katsuki only has time to think oh shit before his face collides with the bastard's back and they're both knocked to the ground. He rolls to a stop, and he can faintly hear the other boy groan in pain, but he's too busy trying not to pass out from the blow to the head. Bukigu, Icy Hot hisses somewhere to his left. Katsuki growls in irritation. What? He spits, struggling to stand back up. He lurches to the side, mind spinning. Footsteps, and then arms around his chest are yanking him to his feet. He snarls, but he's too disoriented to fight off being dragged away to wherever the hell Icy Hot is taking him. Off the street, into an alley, then Icy Hot creates a tall wall of ice to seal off the entrance, but instead of continuing down the alley, he hastily opens a side door to one of the buildings and drags Katsuki inside. As soon as he closes the door behind him, the sound of shattering ice can be heard outside. Heavy footsteps, All Might's footsteps, pause in the alley. Clearly he'd expected them to be there. Both Katsuki and Icy Hot listen with bated breath as the silence lingers on for a brief moment, then All Might's footsteps continue down the alley until they slowly start to fade. Icy Hot lets out a quiet sigh of relief. A second passes, and then Katsuki violently shoves the two-tone bastard away from him. His legs wobble dangerously and his body screams in protest at the sudden movement, but he screams right back at it to stay standing. No fucking way is he going to accept help from that asshole. He stumbles backwards until he can lean against the wall instead, panting heavily from the ordeal. Icy Hot isn't looking too hot either, parts of his right side covered in frost and, much like Katsuki, just generally beaten up from getting tossed and pounded by All Might. They both simultaneously and wordlessly agree on a respite, each retreating to their own corners to catch their breaths and gather themselves as they struggle to process what just happened. Katsuki swallows heavily, his heart pounding against his chest. His attacks hardly did anything against All Might. He's not naive, he knew the man would be difficult, nearly impossible to defeat, but faced with him now, faced with brutal reality, he is so much stronger than Katsuki could have imagined, even with the handicaps. That is what it means to be the best of the best, that immovable force, that power, and Katsuki's explosions, the ones he's so proud of, the ones everyone has always said were so powerful, were nothing to him, a mere sting. He's too weak. He's going to fail again. We can't beat him. Katsuki stills. What? Icy Hot gazes at him, eyes flat. We can't beat him, he says with no inflection, as if discussing the weather. We should run away. Slowly, Katsuki lifts his head to look at him. Icy Hot, who's been doing nothing but winning since he's got to wants to run away? Fuck you, Katsuki spits. Icy Hot presses his lips together. I don't like it either, but it's the smart thing to do. It's what Aizawa-sensei was trying to tell us earlier. I don't give a fuck about what Aizawa-sensei was trying to tell us. Katsuki snaps, trembling with rage. I'm not fucking running. I'm gonna beat his ass and prove my strength while you can go run and prove what a fucking coward you really are. Icy Hot hardly reacts, and that pisses off Katsuki even more. The only indication of his frustration is in his rising voice as he counters, we couldn't beat him together, what makes you think you can beat him alone? Shut up. He snarls. I'll win. He's the #1 hero, damn it. Icy Hot finally snaps, you won't beat him. Hell, you couldn't even beat me, shut up. Katsuki screeches, ignoring the pain in his muscles to lunge at Icy Hot and aim an explosion at his face, which the other boy only barely manages to block with a wall of ice. You wanna fucking go, you prima donna bitch. I'll beat your ass right now. He aims explosion after explosion at the fucker's ice while the other hastily defends himself. What the hell is wrong with you? Icy Hot shouts, stomping his foot on the ground and turning the concrete underneath Katsuki to ice, causing him to slip. As he lands on his back with a pained grunt, Icy Hot continues, why are you always trying to prove yourself? Fuck off. Katsuki spits, struggling to his feet. No, Icy Hot says stubbornly, a firm glint in his eyes as he glares back at Katsuki. Don't think I haven't noticed the way you act like everything's a competition all the time, like if you don't constantly remind people of your strength they'll somehow forget why? What the hell is that about, Bakugo? Katsuki grits his teeth, pulse roaring in his ears. Shut up. Why do you have to beat All Might instead of running away? Icy Hot demands, we could win that way, why do you have to beat him? Because why do you have to beat me? Shut up. His heart threatens to jump out of his throat. Why? Icy Hot presses relentlessly, his voice increasing with each question, oblivious to the suffocating pressure building in Katsuki's chest. What is it all for? Who is it all for? The pressure reaches a breaking point, and he finally screeches at the top of his lungs, Izuku. That shuts Icy Hot up. His mouth closes with a small click, eyes slightly wide. Katsuki lets out a low hiss, and with it, the pressure leaves, like a balloon deflating. Izuku, you fucker, he growls, but it's a mere shadow to his aggression earlier. His shoulders sag, and he clenches his jaw as he glares at the ground. I have to beat All Might, he near whispers. Icy Hot gazes at him carefully. Why? Because I'm his protector. Katsuki snaps, lifting his head to turn his glare on him. Izuku, I'm his protector, and gritting his teeth, he grabs a fistful of his hair in his hand and hisses in frustration, fuck, I keep losing, I keep failing, and I can't. I have to beat All Might. I have to beat you. I have to be strong enough for him. I have to be strong enough to protect him from everything. From villains, from dogs, from reporters, from whatever fucking tries to hurt him. Icy Hot stares at him in confusion. Bukigou, what? Yanking his hand away, Katsuki straightens up and glares at him with renewed fury. That's why I'm going to beat All Might. I'm going to prove to Izuku that I'm the best damn hero to protect him, and I'm going to wipe the floor with your ass once this shit is over. What the hell? The utterly bewildered expression on Icy Hot's face would be comical if Katsuki wasn't so pissed off right now. It isn't a freaking competition. Huh? Protecting Midoriya, Icy Hot says, it isn't just your responsibility, it's everyone's responsibility to protect him. Katsuki curls his lip, a flare of defensiveness going through him. The fuck are you going on about, Icy Hot? Didn't you hear me say I'm his? He's a healer, Icy Hot interrupts. He's our healer. Yours, mine, and everyone in our class and in He's going to heal dozens upon dozens of heroes in his future, and it's going to be their responsibility in turn to protect him. That's how it works. He says this like it should be obvious. You're not the only thing standing in between him and villains. You've done well protecting him up until now, but if you don't learn to trust in others' abilities to keep him safe, you are going to burn yourself to the ground trying to protect him on your own. You're damn it, Bukigou. You don't have to do this all by yourself. But he always has. He's always been the strong one, the one with the best quirk, the biggest kid on the block. That's why he was entrusted to be Izuku's protector in the first place. No one could even dream to compete with him. All of the other kids were just extras, side characters to his main protagonist, and Izuku, who is gentle and soft and so unlike Katsuki in so many ways, was his to protect. All on his own, because nobody else was strong enough to do it, was strong enough to help him, and he wouldn't have had it any other way. He could protect Izuku just fine on his own. Dog teeth flash in his mind. His friend battered and bruised in a dirty alley. Pain and disgust flashing in emerald eyes as he spits out venomous words in his frustration. Katsuki's fist clench. The fear rises within him again, making him taste bile in the back of his throat. He is Izuku's protector because he is the strongest one, the only one. But now Todoroki stands across from him, shaking with adrenaline and blood crusting his lip, probably just as exhausted as he is from the battle but stubbornly staying up because he doesn't want to be the first to collapse. And Katsuki suddenly finds that he's not alone. The building suddenly shudders. All Might has found them. Icy Hot's gaze sharpens, and the question of what will you do goes unspoken. The answer is pulled from him before he even has to think about it. I have to fight him, he says. Unchanged. But instead of arguing, Icy Hot just nods once. I'll fight with you, he says, but only if you don't fight with me. Katsuki's jaw tightens. He doesn't like this. The last thing he wants is some half-assed victory where he relies on fucking Icy Hot's help to win. But there's something else in his voice, an offer. I'll lend you my strength. Use it. Katsuki lifts his chin, gazing at Icy Hot with narrowed eyes. All his life he's been the strongest one. He surrounded himself with people whose quirks paled in comparison to his, and clung to a boy who held strength in a different manner. But Icy Hot is the strongest one in their class. He's powerful and intelligent and so like him in so many ways, and he's telling him to take his strength and use it. Icy Hot holds his gaze firmly, and within those heterochromatic eyes Katsuki thinks he sees a familiar fire burning. His lip curls as the building shudders once more. Here's what we're going to do. Izuku digs his fingers into Ida's forearm as he watches the screens with anxious eyes. Look, there they go. Sero says, see, they totally just made a plan. What? No way, Bukigou-kun just attacked him like 2 seconds ago. Uraraka argues. Todoroki-kun is very adaptable, Ida supplies helpfully. I'm sure he managed to convince Bukigou-kun to work with him somehow. But they're splitting up, Yaozu says, gazing at the screens worriedly. Where are they going? Ah, they're going off to do their own thing, Kaminari says. You know them, they're both lone wolves. That's exactly why they were paired up together, Aizawa's voice drawls from the back of the room. making multiple students jump in surprise. Both Bakugo-kun and Todoroki-kun rely heavily on brute force while neither is good at teamwork. To be paired against an overwhelmingly powerful opponent such as All Might would force them to either adapt their strategies and work together or fail. Izuku's heart sinks even further into his stomach as everyone's heads slowly turn from their teacher to look back at the screens. All Might is sending a few weak pressurized wind attacks on the building Kaken and Todoroki are in, clearly not wanting to demolish it in one blast since he doesn't want to murder his students but instead probably trying to flush them out like rats. It works sort of. It does get them moving out of the building, but Kaken goes out the back alley where they came in and starts going up, using the fire escape from the opposite building so the sound of his explosions doesn't alert All Might to his presence. Meanwhile, Todoroki stays on the ground level and starts heading towards where All Might is aiming his wind pressure attacks from the outside. The building shudders more and more violently the closer he gets, but he protects himself from any falling debris with ice. Finally, there's only one thick wall between him and All Might. Outside, the number one hero reels his fist back, and at the same time Todoroki slams his foot on the ground. Izuku's jaw drops as a massive glacier bursts out from the spot, filling nearly all the screens in a fraction of a second. The same one from the sports festival. Shouts of surprise fill the monitor room. Izuku can't even see All Might anymore. Todoroki got him. He almost wants to laugh in relief. It was so brilliant. He kept that wall between them so All Might wouldn't get the chance to react if he saw him. On screen, Todoroki doesn't stop moving for a second, even though he must be freezing, and immediately turns and begins running for the nearest exit. He repeatedly glances at the walls around him nervously. The building must be creaking. He had to freeze through the wall to capture All Might with his glacier, and in doing so he also froze part of the building, so he might have compromised its structural integrity. As soon as he bursts out of the building, something moves in the corner of Izuku's eye. Kaken. What's he doing? He watches as his friend yells something he doesn't hear, then jumps over the alley onto the roof of the unstable building. Using his explosions to propel him, he dashes towards the massive glacier of ice trapping the number one hero, quickly picking up speed until he reaches the edge and launches himself into the air. Once he's above the glacier, he twists midair, spinning rapidly as he dives back down into the ice like a missile, slamming into it with an explosive force that shatters it into a million pieces. Izuku's eyes widen. Howitzer impact. Large chunks of ice go flying everywhere, along with tiny, needle-like pieces too. Izuku spares a brief moment of concern for All Might. The two strongest students in the class dealt him the strongest attacks in their arsenal. Number one hero or not, that's gotta hurt. The moment is fleeting though. He's still incredibly pissed off at how hard the man was hitting his friends. After all, there are clouds of frost and smoke billowing everywhere, filling the screens and making it hard to see. Izuku can only assume that Todoroki and Kaken are running, but without any sound, he can't be sure. He can't be sure that All Might is down for the count either. After all, he is the number one hero. What if he gets back up and goes after them? Do they have another plan after this? Oh no, they're gonna get beaten up again. God, that was so brutal to watch. The first time the buzzer goes off. Team Todoroki and Bakugo have passed. Huh? That's it? Uraraka asks, blinking in bewilderment. We couldn't see anything. Hagakure complains. That last attack was insane. Ojiru comments, I hope All Might is okay. The frost slowly starts to clear, revealing said hero still picking himself up from amongst the fragments of ice. He seems to be alright, although even through the camera Izuku can see the stiff way he holds himself as he makes his way towards the gate. Well, that's our cue. Recovery Girl gets his attention once again as she hops off her chair. Todoroki-kun and Bakugo-kun are your last tests. You can leave All Might to me. The tone of her voice at the last part is chilling enough to make the students shiver as she stalks out of the monitor room. Izuku trots after her, and they meet up with the returning trio of battered heroes on their way back from the training facility. Despite the man's injuries, Izuku feels no pity for All Might when Recovery Girl starts whacking him with her cane. Do whack. You whack. Not whack. No whack. How whack. To whack. Hold whack. Back. Whack whack, whack. All Might scrambles away from her like a maiden from a mouse. It was part of the test. He practically squeaks. We're supposed to give them a challenge, to do everything we can to stop them. Recovery Girl is not mollified. She stabs All Might's foot with her cane and he yelps, jumping away. Ow. As Recovery Girl continues to berate and attack him, All Might gives Izuku a pleading look. Young Midoriya. Izuku narrows his eyes. You hit Kaken so hard he threw up. And tossing Todoroki-kun around like that? You could have snapped his neck. I'd expect that such an experienced and successful pro hero such as yourself would know how to be more careful. All Might pales. Kaken snickers, nice spine there, Izuku. He quickly shuts up when Izuku turns his heated glare onto him. And, you, don't think you're off the hook either. Running off like that and trying to take on All Might by yourself. Izuku scoffs and shakes his head. Whatever, I'll yell at you later. First, I've gotta make sure you're not about to keel over from internal bleeding thanks to this guy. He gives All Might the stink eye. Yo young Midoriya. All Might sounds betrayed. Kaken sniffs. I feel fine. He looks like he just got hit by a truck, then eaten by a T-Rex, then shit out and left to dry in the hot sun before being trampled by a herd of rhinos. Izuku's eye twitches. You wanna try that again? Todoroki, at least, has the decency to look tired. Can you heal me first? He asks politely. Kaken snarls at him. Fuck you, he's gonna heal me first. Yeah, Izuku agrees. Kaken grins smugly, for a brief moment before Izuku continues, only because you look 10 times worse than he does. Now it's Kaken's turn to look betrayed. Recovery Girl takes a break from assaulting All Might to observe Izuku as he goes about checking his friend's injuries. Miraculously, neither of them seem to have any internal bleeding. A few of Todoroki's ribs are fractured and Kaken has a mild concussion. But no bones need to be set and no surgery is needed before Izuku can use his quirk. As promised, he heals Kaken first, forcing his energy to slow down to a stop at the halfway point. Something he's noticed recently as in, just today is that even when his quirk is stopped, if he keeps his hands on a person he can sense their own natural energy. It swirls around the points where their half-healed injuries linger. Most likely their body's own attempts at healing itself. He'll have to mention that to Recovery Girl later. Alrighty, then, his mentor says as he finishes up with Todoroki, nodding in approval. Good job, Midoriya-kun. I still have to add up your points, but I'm fairly certain that you passed. Izuku lets out a sigh of relief. Todoroki smiles softly at him and he stubbornly ignores how it makes his heart skip a beat. All Might pipes up hesitantly, I'm kind of injured too. Recovery Girl turns to give him a deadpan, merciless look. Then suffer. All Might looks like a kicked puppy. Still, he obediently trails after them as they make their way back to the monitor room. Izuku walks with Kaken on one side and Todoroki on the other. After a few moments of walking in silence, it becomes clear that both are very obviously not looking at or even talking to each other. Izuku glances at Kaken, taking note of his clenched jaw and tense expression. He blinks. They'd had a moment, back during the exam. Something had happened in that building when they were yelling at each other when Kaken was yelling at him. Kaken looked upset, more upset than usual, and Todoroki looked like he was almost yelling too, and Todoroki never yells. But he managed to get Kaken to stop yelling, to listen and to make a plan with him. God, Izuku wishes he could have heard what they had said. He knows it must have been important. The freckled boy glances between them again. So, he says, what did you guys talk about back there? When the two boys glance at him, he adds, we were watching through the cameras, but there was no audio. You guys seemed to have a little spat though. What was it about? Kaken narrows his eyes and turns away sharply. Fucking nothing, he spits. Blinking in surprise, Izuku turns to Todoroki for answers. Todoroki's gaze lingers on Kaken for a moment before he looks away too. Nothing. Feeling a small spark of irritation, Izuku glances over his shoulder at All Might. The pro hero raises his hand innocently. I didn't hear a thing. I was too busy looking for them, he says, then grins and plops a hand on Todoroki and Kaken's heads, ruffling their hair good-naturedly. I am proud of you two for working together so well, though. You make a great team. Fuck off, Kaken snaps, pushing his hand away. He makes eye contact with Todoroki briefly, sharing a look that Izuku doesn't know the meaning of, before they both resume ignoring each other. Izuku glances between them in confusion. It's incredibly annoying not knowing what transpired between them. He could nag for answers, but he knows a fruitless endeavor when he sees one. Kaken will only get even more pissed off, and Todoroki is as stubborn as a mule. Also, Izuku still gets weird around him sometimes, so it's best to avoid that. At the end of the day, though, they did what Izuku thought was impossible for them. They worked together. And Izuku is proud of them. Confused, but proud. Sure, he's still desperately curious about what they talked about, but maybe it's just one of those secrets that will make their bond stronger? Maybe they've come to a mutual understanding of each other that will inevitably blossom into a wonderful dynamic friendship that will help them both grow as individuals? Warmth blooming in his chest, Izuku links his arms around Todoroki and Kaken's on either side of him as they walk. They both glance quizzically at his bright smile. The fuck are you so happy about? Kaken growls. Izuku beams and squeezes them closer to his sides. I'm proud of you guys, he says earnestly. Kaken scowls, a tinge of pink on his cheeks. For some reason, Todoroki chokes. He starts coughing repeatedly into his free arm while Izuku turns to him in concern. Todoroki-kun, are you okay? I'm fine, Todoroki wheezes between coughs. Just choked on my own spit. Izuku relaxes slightly. Kaken scoffs, fucking dumbass. As Todoroki catches his breath, Izuku asks, are you sure you're okay, Todoroki-kun? Your face is looking kind of red. I'm fine. Todoroki cranes away from him. Izuku tilts his head, leaning closer. Are you having trouble regulating your temperature? I'm fine. Jesus fucking Christ, Kaken grumbles exasperatedly under his breath. Izuku frowns at him. What? Kaken just gives him a very unimpressed look and rolls his eyes. When they return to the monitor room, Aizawa announces the conclusion of the practical exam and informs them that they'll receive the results tomorrow. As they make their way out of the building, Izuku notices Kirishima is practically dragging his feet. He and the others that failed must be so upset that they won't be able to go on the summer camping trip. Izuku nudges Kaken. The blonde looks up and Izuku jerks his head over to Kirishima. Kaken blinks. It takes him far too long for him to realize that he's supposed to go over and talk to him. When he does, he hunches his shoulders and stomps after the redhead, raising his leg to deliver a roundhouse kick to Kirishima's lower back. Oi, why the fuck did you fail, idiot? Izuku facepalms. The bus ride back to the main building is unsurprisingly very noisy. Everyone is either discussing their own battles against the teachers or chattering excitedly about the summer boot camp. Izuku himself is feeling slightly tired from using his quirk, so he simply leans back and idly listens to his classmates' conversations. Todoroki is quiet too, sitting in the seat beside him. He looks like he's deep in thought, so Izuku doesn't want to disturb him. Green eyes roam around the bus. Kaminari and Ashido are moaning in defeat. Sero and Ieyasu, who successfully restrained Aizawa, are talking rather animatedly. Izuku hasn't really seen the two interact much before, but Sero is a pretty friendly guy and Ieyasu seems to be getting along with him happily. Near the back of the bus, Kaken and Kirishima are sitting together, the former looking uncharacteristically mellow as they talk. Kirishima is looking a little less upset, though, so Izuku assumes that whatever Kaken's comfort tactic is with him is working. At the front of the bus, Aizawa sits by himself, rubbing his eyes as he stares impassively down at his phone. After a moment, he rubs his eyes again, blinks rapidly, and rubs a bit harder. A familiar, irritated scowl adorns his face. Izuku tilts his head curiously. Standing up, he carefully makes his way to the front and sits down next to the teacher. Aizawa glances up sharply, irritation fading slightly when he realizes that it's him. "What is it, Midoriya-kun?" he asks. "You're rubbing your eyes," Izuku points out in response. Aizawa grunts dismissively. "Ran out of eye drops and didn't realize it until I tried to use them after Saru-kun and Ierazu-san's match. I'm fine." He's clearly bothered, though. Good thing Izuku's prepared for this. Without a word, Izuku unzips one of the medical bags on his belt and rummages around for a moment before fishing out a bottle of eye drops. Aizawa looks like he doesn't know whether to feel confused or grateful. He eventually settles on the latter and graciously takes the bottle, unscrewing the cap and putting in the eye drops with a swiftness that speaks of years of experience. He sighs with relief. "Thanks," he says, glancing at his bag. "Why do you keep eye drops in there?" "For you," Izuku replies simply. Aizawa blinks. "It's my duty to keep my heroes in shipshape, whether it be by healing their injuries or carrying supplies that will help treat the negative effects of their quirks." Aizawa blinks again. Izuku smiles. "You're my responsibility too, sensei." Aizawa stares at him, expression indescribable, then slowly looks down at the bottle in his hand. "How do you know which brand I use?" Izuku just smiles and gets up to rejoin Todoroki. Chapter 24. The next morning, Aizawa announces the logical ruse. Ashido cries out in joy, while Ida nearly shoots up into the air. "You've lied to us twice. Aren't you worried our faith in you might waver?" Aizawa doesn't look particularly concerned. Meanwhile, those who failed the practical exam cheerfully celebrate their second chance. Even the promise of extra lessons isn't enough to dampen their mood. "Why don't we all go shopping together tomorrow?" Hagakure asks excitedly. Kaminari grins. "Good idea. It'll be the first time we've all hung out together." "Hey, Bakugo-kun, you're coming too." Kirishima looks at Kaken, who is already making his way towards the door. "Like I'd do something so irritating," the blonde scoffs. Kirishima pouts. Izuku glances between them, then pipes up, "Well, I'm going." Kaken stops and glares at him. "What the fuck for?" Waving the training camp brochure in his hand, he says, "I need to buy a new swimsuit." He doesn't. Kaken scowls, then glances at Kirishima briefly before huffily turning away. TCH. Guess it can't be helped then. Kirishima and Izuku grin at each other. "What about you, Todoroki-kun?" the redhead asks, looking at the boy over Izuku's shoulder. "You coming shopping with us?" "It'll be fun." Todoroki shakes his head. "I'll be busy, sorry." "Oh, man." Kirishima glances over as Kaken walks out of the classroom. He darts after him. "Yo, Bakugo-kun, where you going?" "None of your fucking business, shitty hair." As their playful bickering fades away, Todoroki steps up to Izuku's side. He does look a bit apologetic. "I go visit my mom on our days off," he explains. "Oh." Izuku smiles. Todoroki shouldn't be sorry about that. His relationship with his mother is far more important than some class shopping spree. Lowering his voice slightly, he asks, "How's that going?" "Good." Todoroki gets quiet for a moment, looking strangely solemn. Slowly, he reaches up to touch his scar. "I think," he says softly, "maybe. Once my bond with my mother is stronger, I'll be ready for you to heal this." Something tugs in Izuku's chest. Todoroki without his scar? It's almost impossible for him to imagine. Still, he smiles and nods. "Of course." After that, he reluctantly has to leave for his lesson with Recovery Girl, which he's already late for. Thankfully, it's a slow day for the infirmary, so there's not much for him to do work-wise. He asks about how he should begin preparing for his license exam, but Recovery Girl tells him not to worry about that just yet. Instead, she gives him the rundown for the training camp. She won't be accompanying them, but Izuku will still be allowed to heal students so long as it's under Aizawa's supervision. It's a bit of a rule bend since Aizawa isn't a licensed medical professional, but the man will be reporting directly back to Recovery Girl, so Izuku assumes that that's good enough. The thought of not having Recovery Girl to rely on makes him a bit nervous, and he can't help but worry about someone getting seriously injured like Kendo did, but he does his best to push away his anxieties. Healers should have more trust in their own capabilities, shouldn't they? During his training session with Aizawa and Shinsu, he's surprised to learn that the boy will be joining the summer boot camp too. It would be illogical for me to stop his training for an entire week when I can just bring him along, Aizawa sniffs. Besides, a brutal training camp is just what Shinsu needs in order to help him catch up to your classmates. Yippee, Shinsu drawls in an equally dry tone. Izuku glances between them. They both gaze down at him with nearly identical tired, hooded eyes. God, they're like twins. What? Aizawa asks. Izuku shakes his head. Nothing. During one of their breaks, he does invite Shinsu to join their class shopping trip, but the purple-haired boy declines. He's a bit disheartened, but he knows that Shinsu isn't exactly a people person, even if he is starting to get along with his classmates fairly well. At least he got Kaken to join. Might as well buy some more weights while we're there, the blonde grumbles as they walk home. It'll be fun, you'll see. Izuku grins cheekily and teases, don't act like you are not thrilled that Kirishima-kun gets to come on the trip too. He swiftly ducks as a hand comes flying towards his head. Snarling, Kaken turns away sharply and shoves his hands in his pockets. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. He snaps as he stomps down the sidewalk. Izuku snickers. The Kashiwara shopping mall is a place that Izuku has never been to before. Which is a bit odd, since it's so popular and he lives pretty close to it, but Enku always preferred to go to smaller strip malls, and Kaken, Tsubasa, and Inabu always favored playing in the arcade or park rather than shopping. The Kashiwara Mall is much bigger than Izuku imagined it would be, and with so many colorful and interesting stores around him, he starts to get really excited. Even though he lied about needing a swimsuit, maybe he can get something else? Some new leggings would be nice. The pair he wears when he trains with Shinsu is getting a bit old now. Oh, aren't those students? Izuku glances up from where he was chatting with Kaminari to see a stranger pointing at them. Other people pipe up. First years? I saw them on TV. Oh, there are still people who remember that. Yoraraka nervously smiles back at the strangers as they cheer and whoop. Amused, Izuku shakes his head and turns back to Kaminari. So what are you gonna get? I don't have any outdoorsy shoes, so I wanna go get some, Kaminari replies. Oh, me too, me too. Hagakure says, startling Izuku. Her sleeves flutter. We should go together. Whoever needs to buy a carry-on bag, come with me and Jiru-kun, Yaozu calls out. Are we separating? Izuku asks. It makes sense. Kirishima waves to get everyone's attention. Since we all have different things we want to do, why don't we decide on a time and meet back up? Izuku perks up. Yeah, we can meet up once we're done and eat lunch together. Kaken, who has been looking disgruntled this entire time, snorts. There's Zuku, always thinking with his stomach. Izuku sticks his tongue out at him. Then let's meet back here in a couple of hours. Once the group disperses, Kirishima turns back to him and Kaken. What are you looking for, Midoriya-kun? Didn't you say you needed some new swim trunks? Oh. Yeah, Izuku lies. I guess I should go with Ojiro-kun and Sato-kun. Don't be stupid, Kaken says irritably, there's a million stores here and it's the middle of summer. You'll find a swimsuit wherever you go. Come on, shitty hair, and I wanna check out a fitness store. He whirls around and starts stomping away. Kirishima trots after him, barking, "Oi, you know my real name." Sighing exasperatedly, Izuku follows them. He supposes he'll actually have to buy some swim trunks now. Maybe it's for the best, he hasn't gone swimming in a while, so his old ones might not fit anyways. Will they even be swimming in the summer camp? He hopes so. It gets kind of hot in July. As he trails behind his two friends, he's happy to see the way they get along. Unsurprisingly, Kirishima does most of the talking, but instead of ignoring him or just idly listening, Kaken seems to be actually paying attention. He watches Kirishima with an expression that Izuku has never seen on the blonde's face before. He almost looks soft. In a rough, Kaken kind of way. It's nice. Izuku is glad his childhood friend has found someone that he actually gets along with really well, someone other than Izuku. They were friends with Tsubasa and Inaba, but neither he nor Kaken were particularly close to the two boys. They were friends mostly because it was just convenient. But what Kaken has with Kirishima? This is different. This is Izuku doesn't realize that someone is behind him until an arm plops around his shoulders. "Wow, you're from up, aren't you?" a voice says excitedly. "Let me have your autograph. You're the new healer, right?" Startled, Izuku struggles not to shyly shrink away as the person presses uncomfortably close to him. His classmates getting recognized makes sense, but him? He thought people would have forgotten by now. Why yeah. He squeaks, eyes darting over to his friends. Since he was trailing behind them, Kaken and Kirishima haven't noticed his predicament yet. The man behind him presses closer. "You must have such a nice quirk if you were able to get the attention of so many pros. Not to mention the hero killer. Weren't you one of the kids that ran into him during the Hazu incident?" His voice is cheerful, but something seems off about it. Izuku is getting more and more uncomfortable by the second. He can't even see this man's face. "Do you sure know your stuff?" "Oh. There they go." The man sounds delighted. Izuku glances up, his stomach sinking when he sees Kaken and Kirishima disappear into a store. The arm around his shoulders seems to become heavier. "Oh, leaving you all by yourself? Don't you think that's foolish? You're a healer, aren't you? Shouldn't they know better than to leave you alone?" The voice chuckles behind him and Izuku stiffens. "Man, I seriously can't believe it. Lucky me, I suppose. It makes me feel like there's something to it." The hand pressing against his chest slowly moves upwards. Something like fate or destiny. Izuku tenses up. 4 long fingers wrap around his neck, the 5th hovering just above his Adam's apple. Slowly, Izuku turns his head to look at his captor. Shigaraki Tamura grins down at him. "Don't you agree, little cheat code?" Izuku's heart skips a beat, then another for good measure. Ice-cold fear floods his veins, seizing his body and paralyzing him. Adrenaline crashes through him and he instinctively reaches up for the villain's wrist. Shigaraki warns, flexing his 5th finger. Izuku's breath hitches. "Don't do anything stupid, now. I've got 4 fingers on you. Surely you remember what'll happen when I add the 5th. A memory flashes across his eyes, Shigaraki's fingers sinking into Aizawa's back, the fabric crumbling away and the skin quick to follow. Izuku's hands drop. "That's better," Shigaraki purrs, "now act natural, like I'm an old friend. Don't make a fuss, okay? Calm down and catch your breath." Izuku's chest is impossibly tight. It feels like he can't breathe, like he's just barely keeping his head above the tide of pure terror that threatens to drown him. His mind is whirling with panic, making it nearly impossible to think. Shigaraki is here, Shigaraki is here. He's got his hand on Izuku's neck and he's 1 finger touch away from death, and God, he's so close to death. What does he do? What does he do? Come on, now. Shigaraki's voice drawls in his ear, making the hair on his neck raise. That won't do. He rubs his thumb against Izuku's fluttering pulse. I told you to calm down. I just want to talk, that's all. Just a little chat. Chat? What could he possibly want to chat about? Izuku is certain that he'll only puke if he speaks now. Amidst the chaos in Izuku's mind, he latches onto one thing. Analysis. He's always been good at analysis. Gathering information. Figuring things out. He's alone, there isn't anyone around to save him, but maybe there is. This place is packed. There's a good chance there's a hero or two amongst this crowd. And his friends, his strong heroes in training, are scattered all around. There's no way Shigaraki would be able to do anything without being caught. He swallows and forces himself to relax slightly. That's better, Shigaraki says. Now, we're going to go sit down and have a little talk. And if you try anything funny, well... He teasingly brings his fifth finger closer to the skin of Izuku's throat. It's simple. You'll get caught, he somehow manages to choke out. If you do that with so many people around, probably. The villain hums, unconcerned. He grins and lowers his head closer to Izuku's, gesturing to the oblivious civilians. But I wonder how many of these guys I could kill before a hero takes me down? Look at them. They're all convinced that nobody would dare attack in such a public place. How many do you think I could kill? 20? 30? He chuckles. It sounds almost fun talking about it now. They're like little bags of EXP running around. As he talks, Izuku feels despair creeping on him. He's so utterly trapped right now. Even if he could get out of Shigaraki's grip by himself, there's no telling if he'd be able to beat him in a fight. He doesn't know how skilled the villain is in hand-to-hand combat, and it'd be impossible to take him down without getting touched by those fingers at least once. Helplessness rises in his throat, making his eyes sting with unshed tears. He's stuck. He's useless, just like he was in New SJ, in Hazu. There's only one thing he can really do. Letting out a shaky exhale, he asks, "What do you want to talk about?" "Buy time." Shigaraki's laugh is a broken imitation of humor. "This is nice," he says, pulling Izuku closer to his chest. "Let's have a seat together, shall we?" He begins to lead Izuku through the mall, keeping the hand on his throat the entire time. Fear pulses through him, making his legs wobble with every step he takes. As people continue to thoughtlessly pass by them, Izuku's eyes dart around, desperately searching for a familiar face. If they could just come across one of his friends. Even if they can't fight Shigaraki, they could at least call the police, alert the heroes, do something to help him. But to his dismay, he doesn't see any of his classmates as they weave through the crowd. Shigaraki leads him over to a bench and they sit down, the taller man pressing uncomfortably close to him. "So," he grunts, "I hate everything." Izuku blinks, then hesitantly peeks up at him through his curls. Now that he isn't wearing that severed hand, Izuku can take in the details of his face. His skin is pale and dry, especially around his lips and blood-red eyes, and there's a small mole under his lip. The light blue hair that frames his face is long and clearly hasn't been washed in a number of days. Aside from that, though, he looks young. Probably not much older than Izuku, actually. For some reason, the boy thought that Shigaraki's face would have been horribly scarred, since he wore such a strange mask. Shigaraki looks at him sharply and Izuku flinches, hastily averting his gaze. The grip on his neck tightens ever so slightly. "I hate everything," he repeats, "but what pisses me off the most right now is the hero killer." Despite the panic seizing his brain, Izuku's mind latches onto that statement. So Stain isn't part of the League of Villains? I attacked Hazu City, I released those Namas, and yet he's the one that ended up on the news. Shigaraki growls, "That's partly your fault. Because he killed one of my Namas to save a weak, pathetic little healer." His finger twitches. "That's my problem. I attacked Hazu, but all anyone ever talks about is him. It pisses me off. Unsure of what else to say, Izuku whispers, "Sorry." "For what?" Shigaraki snaps. Izuku doesn't know. He just said it because maybe it'll keep Shigaraki talking. That's the best he can do right now. He can't reach for his phone with the villain so close to him. All he can do is stall for time and wait for something to happen. He stammers uncertainly, trying to suppress his fearful quivering. "So sorry for bringing more attention to him." The police, tried to keep it quiet. Since there were minors involved, you know? What the hell is he even saying? He can hear Shigaraki gritting his teeth. It doesn't matter how hard they tried to keep it quiet. Nothing's quiet when it comes to him. Everyone is so loud, everything he says is so loud, and it's all that anyone is talking about. I don't get it. What's so different about us? Aren't we doing the same thing? In the end, he just destroyed things he didn't like. I don't get it. Izuku flinches when Shigaraki suddenly moves, but the man is just raising his free hand to scratch at his neck furiously. After a couple of seconds, he abruptly stops. In the corner of his eye, Izuku can see his fingers running over his skin slowly, deliberately. Then, they reach up to touch his dry lips, then his right eye. He looks dumbfounded. Izuku isn't sure why, but the bloodshot gaze he finds himself under a moment later makes him tremble. "You healed me," he rasps. Izuku stiffens. "Eh?" Shigaraki's eyes narrow. "I had scars. Old injuries." He shifts his right shoulder testingly. After a moment, his thumb rubs Izuku's throat thoughtfully. Curiosity sparks in his eyes. "Oh, I see. It's not just your hands, is it?" Izuku swallows heavily. He hasn't even noticed his quirk activating when Shigaraki first grabbed him. All he could do was panic. He didn't even think about what the skin contact would mean. Shigaraki is staring at him in a way that makes his stomach churn with anxiety. He needs to draw the attention away from himself. He needs to keep him talking. He needs "Do you like video games?" he blurts, then snaps his mouth shut. "What the fuck?" Shigaraki stills ... "What? You do, don't you?" Izuku frantically stutters. You called me a cheat code and you called the people bags of EXP. So..." He falters, losing his nerve as Shigaraki's eyes continue to bore into his. He averts his gaze. His windpipe starts to feel just a little bit tighter. "So what?" Shigaraki finally growls. Izuku tries to find his words. He thinks of Kaken. My friend really likes combat games. You know, like Super Smash Bros. Games where you can just destroy things for fun. But, I've always liked games with storylines. So you get to know why you're destroying things. Or why a character does certain things. Shigaraki's eye twitches. He's clearly getting annoyed. Izuku rushes to explain. That's why people like Stain. Because he had conviction. But you. People don't understand you. It's like you kill just because you want to. Well, yeah, I do kill cause I want to. Shigaraki sneers. I destroy things I don't like. But people don't get that. Izuku stresses. People don't understand why. That's what's important. People need to understand your motive, your conviction. He hesitates, warily meeting Shigaraki's scarlet gaze. Why do you want to destroy things? The villain's lip curls. Because I hate everything. Why? Izuku asks. Because. The grip on Izuku's neck tightens painfully as Shigaraki hisses in frustration. Because look at them. He snarls wordlessly at the civilians, milling about them all. They just smile thoughtlessly like everything's fine. He practically spits the last word. I hate it. Why do they do that? Can you tell me that, Izuku? Shigaraki leers at him and Izuku cowers, struggling for air. Because. His mind whirls as he wheezes. They feel safe. How could they feel safe when there's villains like me around? Shigaraki growls. I don't know. Izuku cries out a bit too loudly and Shigaraki squeezes tightly, completely cutting off his air. His grip loosens slightly a moment later and Izuku scrambles for a response. Because they think nobody would dare to attack them. Not when there's heroes so close by. Not when All Might is so close by. Shigaraki goes still. Izuku does too, watching him with wide, frightened eyes. Fear creeps up his spine and he doesn't dare move. The grip on his neck is still far too tight, but slowly, ever so slowly, the pressure eases. I get it now, Shigaraki murmurs after a long pause, why the hero killer pisses me off, why you irritate me. I feel like I understand now. The villain then peels his lips back in a nightmare of a smile. Izuku's face pales. Everything's because of All Might, that's it. When all's said and done, that's where I end up. What was I worrying so much about? He turns his grin to the civilians. These guys are able to smile thoughtlessly because All Might is smiling thoughtlessly. It's because that trash is smiling thoughtlessly, as if there was no one he couldn't save. He sounds downright cheerful as he titters. Oh, I'm so glad we could talk. Looks like I don't have to do anything different after all. I just have to kill that scum. His nails suddenly dig into the soft skin of Izuku's throat, pulling a strangled yelp from him. He immediately regrets it when Shigaraki's gaze snaps back to him. There's something different now, some added layer to the tension that already fills the air. The grip on Izuku's neck flexes, holding him steady when Shigaraki leans closer to his face. The scent of stale breath makes nausea bubble in his stomach. I hate All Might for creating this fucked up society, Shigaraki rasps, his voice nearly a whisper, and I hate you for healing him. Izuku stares, trembling in his grasp. Once I realized why All Might wasn't as weak as he was supposed to be, I wanted to kill you. Even after Sensei told me he wanted you, I wanted to kill you. Troublesome little cheat code. He sneers, thumb pressing hard against his throat. Izuku feels like he can't breathe, this time for a different reason. Shigaraki's sensei wants him? His mind flashes back to his conversation with All Might and Mirio. If he really did survive, then that's probably why Shigaraki has his eye on you. He's probably injured and he needs a healer. Someone strong enough to heal him. It really is All for One, then. It has to be. Izuku feels almost dizzy with fear. The man that's been stealing quirks for over a century, the villain that crippled All Might, is alive. And wants him. But now I understand, Sensei, Shigaraki says, seemingly to himself, I understand that you're much more useful to us alive. His fingers ghost over his own lips, once more, gaze never leaving Izuku's. His eyes light up. You're going to be my cheat code now. And he sounds so disgustingly excited about it. So let's get going. The villain stands up abruptly, dragging Izuku up by the throat. The boy flails, eyes widening in alarm. Wait, what? Why? Shigaraki leers at him, you're a clever one. Don't act like you haven't figured it out. Fresh terror rears up within him. There's too much happening right now. This is happening too fast, help hasn't arrived yet, he needs more time, he needs to keep Shigaraki talking. What's All for One after? Shigaraki pauses, then shrugs. Who knows? But right now, it's you. It's a confirmation, at least. All for One is the one behind this. That information doesn't help Izuku at all right now, though. As Shigaraki starts leading him through the mall once again. Anxiety and fear mounts within him with every step he takes, every step that brings him closer to. What? His capture? He's being kidnapped, isn't he? It's like he's 10 years old again, being taken by villains, being snatched away from his life, all for his quirk. And he can't do anything about it, not without getting himself or dozens of other people killed. His breath starts to quicken and he glances around desperately for his classmates. The thought of any of his friends getting into a fight with this villain makes him feel sick, but at least they have a chance, at least they can do something. He can't, he's just a weak pathetic damsel in distress that once again needs heroes to come and save him when villains try to steal him away. But there's no one coming, no one. He's the one who needs to do something. Only he can save himself now. His fear spikes when Shigaraki takes him out through one of the back exits of the mall. As they continue walking, the number of people around them starts to dwindle. With a jolt, Izuku realizes that Shigaraki is trying to lead him into an alley, where Kurogiri will no doubt warp them away. Take him away from everything he knows and loves. Make him disappear without a trace. Feeling his pulse quicken beneath his fingertips, Shigaraki laughs. Oh, no need to get so nervous, little cheat code. You won't get hurt if you play nice. His tone is so light and condescending, like he doesn't have a worry in the world. Like he knows he's already won. And that, mixed with the Cheshire-like grin on his face, plus the disgusting feeling of helplessness that threatens to make his eyes sting, brings about a new emotion, stubbornness. No. No, this is not how this is going to end. He will not let himself be taken so easily. He's a student in the hero course of the most prestigious school in the country, goddammit. He's a student, and he will not let this villain win. Precious time dwindles rapidly as he tries to think of how to get out of this. He can't fight now because Shigaraki might kill the people around him. He could wait until they're alone in the alley, but he might just end up getting warped away by Kurogiri. So what's next? What does he know about his captor? Shigaraki is a young villain being guided by All For One with a quirk that disintegrates anything he touches with all 5 fingers. He's kidnapping him because he needs him to heal All For One, which means that he won't kill him. Izuku blinks, taking note of the positioning of Shigaraki's hand on his throat. 3 of his fingers are resting on top of his trachea, the 4th hovering right over his larynx. His thumb is pressing into his left external jugular vein. A memory flashes before his eyes, the same one as before, of Aizawa's skin crumbling away. But this time, he realizes something new. Shigaraki's quirk is slow. An idea forms in his mind. A horrible one. One that Recovery Girl will most certainly kill him for if he makes it out of this alive. But he's a healer in training, he knows his body better than most teenage boys do, and he knows that he can make it. This is his only chance. He just has to be brave enough to take it. God, Mom, please don't kill me, he whispers in his mind. Then you know, he rasps, eyeing the alley that grows closer and closer, if you want me to heal your sensei, then there's something about my quirk you should know. Oh? Shigaraki purrs in his ear, and what's that? Izuku takes a deep breath. It doesn't work if I'm injured. He reaches up and presses the 5th finger down. He screams. Shigaraki immediately lets go out of shock and Izuku elbows him in the chest, scrambling away while clutching at his throat. Pain, pure, unadulterated pain bursts across his neck as his skin crumbles away, leaving raw, exposed muscle that just pours rivers of blood. He lets out a choked wail as he presses his hands against his own neck, desperately trying to stem the flow. He knows he only has mere minutes to get help before he bleeds out. This needs to end quickly. His whole body trembles violently as he forces himself to stay standing, glaring at Shigaraki through tear-filled eyes. The villain looks like he's about to reach out for him again, but then stops. He stares at Izuku with wide, bloodshot eyes. Then you're lying. He hisses. Nope, Izuku chokes out. If you want to take me so badly you're gonna have to fight me, and if you fight me I'll get hurt. Then all you'll have is a useless healer and a horde of pro heroes after you. He can barely understand himself as he speaks, voice breaking repeatedly as blood spews from his lips. Fuck, this hurts like hell. Shigaraki freezes. His eyes dart between Izuku and something behind him. No doubt his scream caught the attention of the few civilians lingering around. Shigaraki's hands twitch. Kill them and you'll get caught. Izuku coughs up more blood, but his gaze is steady as he glares at Shigaraki. Take me and you'll get caught. I suggest you run. He's all too aware of the blood soaking his hands, of his heartbeat pounding in his head. This is taking too long. He needs Shigaraki to leave now. Someone notices the blood. Hey! Hey kid! Are you alright? Sparing a quick glance to the side, he sees a couple of people running over to him. For a moment, he's terrified that Shigaraki won't listen to reason and just kill them anyway, but finally the villain spits. Damn it! He snarls, furiously scratching at his neck. Damn it, damn it, damn it. You are infuriating. Burying his teeth in a snarl, he warns, don't rest easy, you little shit. My sensei always gets what he wants. So don't think you've won. Then finally, he turns around and flees, disappearing into the alley just as the two civilians reaches Izuku. He collapses to his knees, finally letting out a strangled cry as he presses his hands to his mangled throat. Adrenaline is the only thing keeping him from passing out, but he's still in the most unbearable amount of agony that he's ever felt before. A stream of blood pours down onto the concrete below him. Police, he desperately rasps, police. The two civilians stare at him in horror. Police? The man exclaims, kid, you need a fucking ambulance. Mida-san, call 911. The woman startles and pulls out her phone while the man drops to his knees beside Izuku, pulling off his shirt to press it to his throat. Izuku takes it gratefully but continues to shake his head. Need police, he chokes around blood. There's villain. What? Kid. The man's head frantically whips between him and the alley where Shigaraki disappeared. Izuku blesses his lucky stars that this stranger is smart. Mida-san. He barks at the woman who's tearfully yelling into the phone, tell them that there's just been a villain attack. Send the police. As the woman relays the message, Izuku's vision starts to swim. The shirt pressed against his neck quickly becomes soaked with blood, the pool beneath Izuku steadily growing bigger. Idly, his mind starts to wonder about his injuries. With the way Shigaraki's thumb was pressed against it, his left external jugular vein is no doubt damaged. That's his main worry, but he supposes his superficial cervical artery may have been disintegrated as well. Funny, he thinks as his mind starts to grow fuzzy, that these things are so much easier to think about from a medical standpoint. The man's hands are over his as they press the shirt against his throat, so he notices when Izuku starts to go slack. Kid? Hey, kid, stay with me. Part of his mind, the part not yet delirious with pain and blood loss, screams at him to stay awake, to keep fighting until he's safe. Letting out a garbled wheeze, Izuku rasps, Shigara. Ki. Shiga. What? The man asks. Shigaraki? Another voice exclaims. Izuku hadn't realized that more people are crowding around him now, gasping in shock or crying out for help. You mean that League of Villains guy? A woman's voice gasps, Nissan, this kid isn't he that new healer from we saw him in the sports festival, right? Oh my god. That's him. Kid, hang on. The ambulance is almost here. Is he the one that attacked you, kid? The man beside Izuku asks and he feebly nods. Mida-san, tell the police that Shigaraki was here. Hey, kid, no, stay with me. He grabs Izuku when the boy's head dips down towards the pool of blood, his strength rapidly leaving him. Kid, please, stay awake. Help is almost here, see? His ears feel like they're stuffed with cotton, but Izuku can faintly hear the sounds of sirens approaching. He's too tired to open his eyes and look, though, so he lets himself fall slack against the man. His own hands have long since fallen, away from his neck, the only thing keeping pressure on his gaping wound being the man's hands. Whoever this guy is, Izuku has to be sure to thank him later. That's the last thing he thinks before his mind succumbs to darkness. Chapter 25. Izuku drifts in and out of consciousness for he isn't sure how long, actually. All he knows is that awareness comes back slowly and in pieces. He'll wake up and stare at a blank ceiling for a few seconds before falling unconscious again. This happens a couple more times before he finally manages to stay awake for a bit longer. Everything is dark when he opens his eyes again. He blinks slowly, sluggishly, feeling as if he isn't quite existing. It takes him a while before he figures that there might be more to this world than just a blank ceiling. He should probably look around, right? He isn't really aware of his head turning, but he does notice a blurry figure next to him. He slowly blinks a few times. It's his mother. She's sitting in a chair next to him and he's on a bed? But not his bed. And this room. It's not his either. He blinks again and suddenly Inko's face is right next to his. A few moments later, he realizes that she's crying, no, sobbing, actually. She's saying something and squeezing his hand tightly, but he can't really understand her. Everything feels garbled and muted. He's confused as to where he is and why his mother is crying so much, but overall he just feels really tired. His brain longs for a nap and yeah, that sounds nice right now. So he falls back asleep. When he wakes up again, everything's a bit clearer. The room isn't so dark anymore, so he can see that yes, indeed this is not his room. So he's not at home. Which means he's somewhere else. He tries to crane his neck, but that feels not quite painful, but weird and pull why, so he falls still. Instead, he does his best to look around with just his eyes. Inko is still there, talking to another woman. A familiar woman. In fact, there's two other people in his strange new room that look familiar too. The woman is talking to his mother, the man is frowning down at his phone, and the boy Izuku's eyes meet Kaken's. Oh, she is Izuku. As the memories come flooding back to him, Inko jumps out of her seat and darts to his side. Tears are already flying out of her eyes as she grips his hand tightly. Izuku, baby, it's okay, you're alright. You're okay now. Izuku tries to talk, tries to ask what happened, but as soon as he does his throat explodes with pain. Grimacing, he instinctively whimpers, but that only makes it worse. Inko hastily shushes him. No, baby, no, don't talk. Masaru-san, can you get the doctor? The man nods and rushes out of the room. Meanwhile, Izuku struggles to wrap his mind around everything. Shigaraki tried to take him, put his hand on his neck, but Izuku was the one that pushed that last finger down. God, what was he thinking? He's never regretted a decision more in his life. His throat feels like it's been shredded to ribbons, pain settling deep and heavy. He reaches up to feel it, of course it's covered in bandages, but his mother pulls his hand away. No, sweetheart, don't do that, Inko says shakily. Your throat got hurt really bad, okay baby? Don't move. Forcing back tears, Izuku gives the barest of nods. His neck protests, but even so he can tell that the pain is dulled. His eyes land on his forearms, where countless needles and tubes connect to him. There's something on his face too, an oxygen mask? It's kind of itchy, but with the way his labored breath wheezes through his uncomfortably swollen throat, he's grateful for its presence. Uncle Masaru returns a minute later, recovery girl and another doctor walking in after him. Izuku's attention immediately goes to the older woman, and he nearly flinches when he sees the deep sorrow in her eyes as they land on him. Midoriya-kun, I'm glad you're awake, she says softly, walking up to his side. I'm sure you're very confused right now. Do you remember much of what happened? Izuku nods stiffly, carefully, making sure to not disturb his tender throat. Her eyes widen slightly. Shigaraki Tamura attacked you, is that true? Izuku hesitates. Technically, he's the one who disintegrated his own throat, but he can't exactly say that out loud. Still, he nods again. Inko lets out a choked sob and Mitsuki rubs her shoulder. Kaken says nothing, watching with a tense expression. Recovery girl takes a deep breath and sighs. We were fairly certain, but he disappeared once the police and heroes reached the mall, so there was no confirmation. She reaches over and takes his hand in her own smaller ones. I'll tell you what happened. You were already unconscious from blood loss when the paramedics arrived, but they got you to the hospital quickly enough to save you. You've been in and out of surgery for the past day and a half. The skin and muscles in your throat were severely disintegrated, although thankfully there was only minimal damage to your trachea and larynx, which is why it's hard for you to speak. The main problem we had was with the damage to your arteries and blood vessels. It seems that Shigaraki had a finger on your left external jugular vein. She falters, squeezing her eyes shut as she clings to his hand. Izuku swallows, tears stinging his eyes. He's never seen his mentor look so shaken before. Well, she sniffles, you know how these things go. You've read that stupid anatomy book more times than I can count. Izuku's lip twitches and she hiccups, reaching up to wipe away a stray tear as she struggles to recompose herself. Taking a deep breath, she continues, anyway, you're going to have a scar and your voice might be a bit weak for a while, but you're expected to make a full recovery. She finally smiles, albeit shakily. You're going to be okay, Midoriya-kun. Izuku meets her watery gaze for a moment, then looks away. This is a lot to take in. He was just supposed to go to the mall with his friends. He doesn't understand why. No, he understands why this happened. All for One is after him. He needs Izuku to heal him. The thought alone makes Izuku's chest tighten with fear. The doctor that came with Recovery Girl comes up beside him. Hello, Midoriya-kun, he says, my name is Dr. Nishidako. I'll be overseeing your recovery process, along with Recovery Girl, of course. Now I don't want you to move your neck too much, so tap your finger once for yes and twice for no, okay? Izuku almost nods, but then thinks again and taps his finger. Dr. Nishida smiles gently. Good. Are you in any pain? The agony that Izuku had felt when he tried to talk has died down significantly, but there's still an intense ache deep in his throat. It feels like there's a heavy weight surrounding his entire neck, like his muscles are paralyzed and numb with pain. It's like his whole body is just telling him, don't use this. He taps his finger once. As the doctor moves to fiddle with his tubes, probably increasing the dosage of pain meds, Andy Mitsuki speaks up. Her voice is soft, well, soft for Andy Mitsuki, as she asks, hey, kiddo? I know you're probably really tired, but we need to know what happened back there. Everyone's just been kind of confused. Izuku looks at his mother, who startles and starts frantically digging through her purse. Oh. Here, you can. She fishes out his phone and pushes it into his hands. He turns it on and blinks at the screen. Hundreds of messages and missed calls stare back at him. The first few dozen are from Kaken and his classmates, but then they start coming from All Might and Recovery Girl and even his senpais. All worried, all begging him to respond. Guilt claws at his chest. He didn't mean to make everyone worry so much. After some encouragement from his mother, he opens up his notes app and starts typing. He describes the series of events from the beginning, how everything was fine at first, but Shigaraki managed to sneak up on him and put a hand on his neck, stealing him away from Kaken and Kirishima while their backs were turned. How he ranted about the hero killer and decided that murdering All Might would be his conviction. It's hard to explain Shigaraki's reasoning for kidnapping him without mentioning All for One, but he just says that the villain wanted him for his quirk. And for some reason, maybe it's the drugs that are dulling his mind as well as his pain, but he doesn't panic as badly as he thought he would when describing all this. He knows it's strange to be so calm right now, he knows he should be freaking out, but the wave that rose within him during that encounter is a mere simmer now, muted by the soothing numbness filling his veins. Dr. Nishida reads aloud everything he writes as he types it. Inka tried at first, but she quickly dissolved into tears as soon as she got to the part where Shigaraki put his hand on his neck. Everyone is shocked when they learn that Izuku was the one to cause his own injury. Midoriya-kun. Recovery Girl exclaims, aghast, are you insane? You know how fatal that could have been. A feeble flash of frustration twinges within him. What was I supposed to do? Dr. Nishida reads as Izuku types, let him take me? Let him kill innocent civilians? They get quiet after that. Izuku stifles a sigh, blinking tiredly. Now that he's not in pain anymore, he finds himself exhausted. It doesn't matter. Everyone looks over at Kaken as he finally speaks up. The blonde's jaw is clenched as he glares at the ground with a tight expression. It shouldn't have happened in the first place, he hisses through his teeth. That fucker got you while you were with me. Izuku's heart leaps to his throat at the sight of his best friend's eyes glistening with unshed tears. I'm gonna be strong enough for you. I promise. Oh, Kaken, Izuku thinks miserably as he gazes at his friend. He can't imagine how horrible Kaken must be feeling right now. Oi, Auntie Mitsuki growls half-heartedly, lightly cuffing her son's head. Don't be an idiot. It's not your fault. Her words don't seem to soothe Kaken at all. Dr. Nishida touches Izuku's shoulder gently, getting his attention. The police sent over a detective. His name is Tsukaki Namasa. Apparently you're familiar with him? Izuku taps once. That's good. If you could send Recovery Girl what you wrote, she can pass it on to him. He might want to question you further, but that can wait for later. Izuku taps again in confirmation before copy and pasting his statement into his messaging app. Recovery Girl's phone buzzes a moment later. Despite his fatigue, he also makes sure to ask if everyone else is okay. They're fine, his mentor replies. They all wanted to come see you, but they're restricting the number of visitors. Even though we did surgery, Dr. Nishida adds, there wasn't much skin left for us to stitch. So you still basically have an open wound. My quirk essentially lets me put a liquid bandage over wounds, but it's very delicate when it comes to bigger injuries. He nods at the Bukagus. Ideally, it would be family only, but your mother insisted that they be allowed in too. Inko gives a wobbly smile and Auntie Mitsuki squeezes her hand comfortingly. I didn't want to risk using my quirk until you got more of your strength back, Recovery Girl says. We'll see how you're doing tomorrow and maybe I'll use it then. Izuku taps once and gives her what he hopes is a reassuring smile, if only to get the heavy expression off her face. It works, and she smiles back, patting his arm soothingly. Well, you should get some rest now. I need to get back to the lobby to update Aizawa-san and Toshinori-san. They've been waiting around all day. She bids goodbye to Inko and leaves the room along with Dr. Nishida. Uncle Masaru and Auntie Mitsuki start to wrangle a reluctant Kaken outside too. He needs to sleep now, dumbass, Auntie Mitsuki growls, shoving her son's shoulder. Kaken snarls and shoves back, I'm not leaving him. As the two bicker back and forth, Izuku feebly taps his mother's arm. She straightens up. Mitsuki-san. Wait. The two blondes pause and look over. Izuku raises his arm slightly and makes a grabby motion with his hand. He wants to call out, but he can't, so instead he pleads for Kaken with his eyes. A second later, his friend is right by his side. Zuku. Izuku grabs his hand. It's broad and calloused and a lot warmer than his, but Kaken always seems to be warmer than him thanks to his quirk. It feels nice now, though. Izuku blinks up at his friend and smiles tiredly. Kaken stares down at him with an indescribable expression. Red eyes roam over his face, then trail down to his bandaged neck, then his forearms littered with a multitude of tubes. His whole body shudders as he inhales sharply and squeezes his eyes shut, brow furrowing. His hand clutches Izuku's tightly. Exhaling shakily, he lets out a broken whisper of, "I'm sorry." Even if Izuku could talk right now, he isn't sure he would know what to say. He doesn't know if anything he says could make Kaken feel any better. But he rubs his thumb over the other boy's knuckles anyway, trying to get his attention. Red eyes open again and their gazes meet. "It's okay," Izuku tries to say with his eyes. "It's okay, please don't cry." He should know by now that Kaken is a terrible listener. Tears splash onto their clasped hands. Kaken shuts his eyes again, breath hitching, but the tears still come. Izuku just continues to rub his knuckles with his thumb, sadly watching as his best friend, the strongest, most determined person he knows, cries over him. Their parents watch silently, patiently waiting for Kaken to finish grieving. When they do finally leave, Izuku falls asleep with his friend's tears still on his skin. Katsuki is numb the entire car ride back. He stares unseeingly out the window at the dark streets passing by, his cheeks sticky with dried tears. Neither of his parents say a single word, casting concerned glances his way every few minutes. He keeps his eyes locked on some invisible horizon, focusing on the way the city blurs in order to ignore the deep crack in his chest that lies thinly veiled by the delicate numbness that has settled over it. He focuses on the numbness and doesn't let himself stray any further, doesn't let himself touch that deep, agonizing crack, because if he does he'll heal. Katsuki blinks, and then they're pulling up in his driveway in front of his house. He immediately gets out of the car and marches right up to the doorstep, fishing his own key out of his pocket to let himself in and ignoring his mother's sharp bark behind him. As soon as he's inside, he goes straight to his room, slams the door behind him, and the silence that presses down on him is stifling. His room stares back at him, quiet and still and dark. He hasn't turned on his lights yet. The only thing illuminating his room is the glow-in-the-dark stars he and Izuku painted and stuck up on his ceiling when they were kids. The crack in his chest grows bigger, and Katsuki finds he suddenly can't quite breathe well. He turns on the light. Izuku is alright, he tells himself. Izuku is okay. Izuku is going to be okay, that's what Recovery Girl said. He saw him with his own eyes. He's awake, he's alive, he's breathing, he's in pain, a louder voice says. Even though he tried not to show it, Katsuki could see in his eyes that he was in so much pain and it's all his fault. Squeezing his eyes shut, Katsuki brings his clenched fist up to his mouth and grits his teeth so hard it hurts. His eyes burn and his throat is so tight it feels like he can't breathe, and it makes him want to simultaneously scream and wreck everything in his room until he feels better, and break down sobbing uncontrollably like a little bitch. He gasps, but there's not enough air and fuck that, he tries again. He gasps again, over and over, chest heaving wildly, but his lungs feel too tight and his head is spinning and fuck, why isn't there any air in his room? His heartbeat is rabbiting and he's drenched in cold sweat like he just ran a mile, except that doesn't make sense. He hasn't done anything. He needs to do something. With a jolt, Katsuki lurches forward and takes a couple of stumbling steps before abruptly stopping in the middle of his room. Stop, what the fuck is he doing? Where is he even going? God fuck, why can't he breathe? Panting heavily, Katsuki clutches at his chest as his mind spins, growing dizzier and dizzier by the second. Just then, something catches his eye. There, on its usual spot on his desk, a book. A cookbook. The one made up entirely of the spiciest recipes known to man. The one Izuku gave him for his 13th birthday because he knew he would love it, because he knew he would spend the next few weeks trying out every single recipe and perfecting the ones he liked best before forcing Izuku to try them, even though he hates spicy food. But he'd smile through the burning pain in his mouth anyway, because all he wanted to do was make Katsuki happy. Katsuki's breath hitches and he stumbles back a step, looking up. His eyes land on an old All Might poster taped above his desk. Izuku has the same one too above his own desk. He knows that. They'd bought a matching set together at a nearby fair when they were 9. His throat tightens. His room seems to close in around him. How the hell did he not notice this before? Katsuki jerks back, whips around, and flinches when he spots one of Izuku's sweaters lying on top of his dresser. He must have forgotten it at some point that two boys are at each other's houses so often. Leaving clothes is no big deal. Katsuki's pretty sure this sweater has even been here for some time now, but fuck. A small, desperate noise escapes the back of his throat as he stumbles backwards, head spinning and on the brink of hyperventilation. As he stands trembling in the middle of his own room, all he can see is Izuku. He feels like he's dying. With a final, wheezing gasp, he collapses to his knees, quivering uncontrollably as he struggles to fill his lungs with oxygen. Panic and confusion swirls in his brain and his chest is burning, but so are his eyes. The lack of air has nothing to do with the sudden blurriness in his vision, and another high-pitched, broken noise escapes his lips as fat, wet tears drip onto the carpet below him. He brings a hand to his mouth, desperately trying to muffle the pathetic cries, but all he does is make it even harder for him to breathe. Dizzy and weak, he lets himself slump forward until his forehead touches the ground. Curled in on himself, he just focuses on struggling to breathe, his loud gasping and muffled sobs filling the heavy silence in the room. His phone buzzes in his pocket. Both the noise and the sensation are jarring, causing Katsuki to flinch hard. Breath-hitching, he blinks and fumbles around in his pocket for a moment before taking his phone out. Kirishima 7:35 p.m. Hey bro. I just wanted to check in, see if you're doing okay. You haven't really said anything since. You know. Just letting you know I'm here to talk, if you ever need. And I'm also texting to ask if there are any updates on Midoriya-kun? I figured if anyone were to know, it'd be you. Katsuki stares at the screen, still breathing heavily. His phone trembles slightly in his hand. Shitty hair. Katsuki hasn't spoken to him or any of the others since the accident. They haven't been told where the hospital is. Principal Nezu and the heroes have been strict about security around the place since Izuku is too unstable to be moved to a private hospital. Katsuki's lucky he's even allowed to visit him. He doubts anyone has bothered to give him much information on Izuku's condition. They must be going out of their mind with worry. He should tell them. Something clicks in his mind, and before he even realizes it, he's opening up Class 1A's group chat. He never uses it. He's only in it because Izuku gave Four Eyes his number when the bastard felt the need to make the stupid group chat, and he keeps it on silent practically all of the time, but he opens it up now because something in his brain acknowledges it simply as something to do. His fingers tremble violently as he types out a quick message, just letting everyone know that Izuku's fine, that he's awake, and that recovery girl said he's going to make a full recovery. He doesn't bother going into too much detail, and just typing out a short message is difficult enough with the way his hands are shaking, but after the third time of deleting and retyping the last sentence he manages to send it out. Almost immediately, he begins getting a flood of messages from his classmates, some exclaiming in joy, some asking for more details, but he barely reads them. Instead, he turns off his phone and lets out a shaky breath, biting his lip as he lets his forehead fall to the ground once more. His breathing is still labored, his chest is still too tight, but it's a hair's breadth better than it was before. He's afraid. A harsh, bitter voice sparks in the back of his head that if he looks up, if he sees Izuku's stars above him, if he sees Izuku all around him again, that it will be bad again. That he'll break a lot worse than before. Because he's weak, he's pathetic. He's curled up on the floor of his room crying like a fucking baby because he can't handle the fact that his best friend got hurt and it's all his fucking fault. Oh god, it's all his fucking fault. How the hell is he supposed to handle that? His phone buzzes again. Katsuki flinches again. But his phone doesn't buzz just once. It's long and repetitive, and it takes Katsuki's mind a moment to catch up and realize that someone is calling him. Frowning, he grabs his phone and stares in bewilderment at the screen. Icy Hot is calling him. What the fuck? Since when does he have Icy Hot's number? Oh well, the group chat, he supposes that makes sense, but since when does Icy Hot ever call him? They're not exactly friends, far from it. Confusion has momentarily sliced through his panic, dulling it ever so slightly and making just enough room for an inkling of curiosity. Without pausing for much thought, Katsuki presses the answer button and lifts the phone to his ear. Hey, Icy Hot says immediately. Hey, Katsuki grunts back warily, voice rough and thick from his crying. He resists the urge to clear his throat. Are you okay? Icy Hot asks. Katsuki's face twists into a scowl. What the hell is he asking that for? The fuck do you mean, am I okay? He barks harshly. There's a brief pause, then Icy Hot says, I just thought. After everything that's happened you might not be. There's something in his voice that Katsuki can't quite decipher. The confusion grows. Todoroki's voice is hardly ever anything but monotonous. The last time he heard otherwise was back when. What the hell is wrong with you? What is it all for? Who is it all for? Zuku. Katsuki grits his teeth. Right. That happened. He doesn't respond. Silence fills the room, pressing down on his ears, only interrupted by his still ragged breathing. He can faintly hear icy hot breathing through the phone, but the other boy doesn't say anything. Defensiveness has his hackles raising, but frustration makes his throat tighten. What the hell does this fucker want? He poured out his insecurities like a fucking idiot for the other two. Here and now he's come to what? Rub salt in the wound now that Katsuki's failed yet again, now that Zuku's fine. He bites out. I didn't ask about Midoriya, icy hot responds. Impatient, Katsuki snaps. The fuck do you want, icy hot? This isn't on you, Bakugo, icy hot replies immediately. None of this is your fault. Katsuki lets out an incredulous, harsh bark of laughter that's completely devoid of humor. He can't believe what he's hearing. Not my fault? Not my fault? That motherfucker, that villain, got him while he was with me. It is entirely my fault. He shouts, ignoring the way the edges of his eyes prick. Do you blame Kirishima? Icy Hot asks quietly. What? Kirishima was also there when it happened, the other boy says. Do you blame him for Midoriya's injuries, too? What the fuck? Katsuki splutters, taken aback. No fuck you, shitty hair's not, he growls in frustration, giving his head a rough shake. I told you before, you fucker, I'm his protector. I've been watching out for him for over 10 fucking years. I should have known better. I should have been keeping an eye on him. I should have. There are things you could have done that could have led to even worse outcomes. Icy Hot interrupts in an even tone. Shigaraki infiltrated Japan's most prestigious hero school and attacked an entire class in broad daylight. Do you really think a couple of hero students would have dissuaded him from trying to kidnap Midoriya? I would have blown his ass to bits, Katsuki growls, but Icy Hot is right on his heels with a rebuttal. And Midoriya still could have gotten hurt in the process, he says. Then Katsuki hears a soft, almost frustrated sigh through the phone. Look, what I'm saying is we can't focus on what we did in the past, we just have to focus on what we can do better in the future. You have that written down or some shit? Katsuki snips. It's a lame retort and they both know it. Icy Hot doesn't even acknowledge that he said anything and continues on, so stop doing this to yourself. Midoriya wouldn't want you to blame yourself for this. You know he wouldn't. His voice sounds firm and oddly chastising. It's so strange to hear it coming from him of all people, and it makes something stir in Katsuki's chest. You know who he probably is blaming, just like everyone else is? Shigaraki, the one who actually hurt him. So stop making yourself the villain here, because feeling guilty won't get you anywhere, and Midoriya needs all of us, especially you, to be strong for him right now. I watch you strive to do that for him every single goddamn day, so don't you dare stop now. Alright? Katsuki's throat is even tighter than it was before, and the deep ache in his chest is back with a vengeance. For some stupid reason his eyes are stinging again and he doesn't know why, but he blames it on Icy Hot anyway. They accidentally land on Zuku's sweater lying on his dresser and he sucks in a ragged breath, then reaches up to slap his hand over his mouth so Icy Hot won't hear. Bakugo? Icy Hot's voice questions through the phone. Irritation sparks in his heart and he grits his teeth. Fuck this. Fuck this. What the hell is he doing? Fucking crying like a little bitch, being so fucking pathetic that Icy Hot of all people feels the need to call him to cheer him up? Fuck that. When the hell did he become so pathetic? Icy Hot's right, and fuck isn't that the worst thing ever? Katsuki doesn't have time to mope around in a pit of self-pity. He needs to get off his ass and be strong for Zuku, now more than ever. Straightening up, Katsuki angrily wipes away the drying tears around his eyes. Fuck you, who said I was stopping? He snaps, mentally cursing when his voice cracks. I'm fucking fine. Good, Icy Hot says. That's all I wanted to hear. Katsuki scoffs, great. A long silence stretches between them. Since Icy Hot has clearly finished saying what he wanted to say, Katsuki is about to hang up without bidding him goodbye because they're not friends, but Icy Hot's voice stops him before he can hit the end call button. And Bakugo? Katsuki grunts. How is Midoriya? Really? You didn't give much detail. That makes Katsuki pause. He knows Izuku has some sort of little crush on Icy Hot, and considering some of the signs he's seen, he knows it goes both ways. He hasn't really given it much thought aside from finding mild amusement at how they act like blushing schoolgirls around each other, since they're both oblivious idiots that have equal levels of stupidity. Of course it's not something that he takes too seriously because he knows Izuku, and he knows that Izuku is soft and friendly and easily flattered, so of course he would be distracted by something as stupid as a crush. But as he listens to Icy Hot's voice, something about it makes him wonder if maybe, just maybe, it runs a little bit deeper than a crush on his end. His lips press into a thin line. Izuku's fine, he says flatly, then hangs up. Letting his hand drop to his side, he takes a deep breath and then exhales. It's long and still shaky, but his chest doesn't feel so tight anymore, and his head isn't spinning. Whatever the hell happened, whatever indescribable panic that was in his head is gone now, leaving only dry tears on his cheeks and a deep weariness in his bones. Sighing, he rubs his face with his fingers until the stickiness is gone and looks up. Izuku is still everywhere around him, but instead of his chest tightening until he can't breathe, his heart just aches with longing. His eyes fall on Izuku's sweater once more. Fuck it. The sweater is too small for him to wear, but that doesn't stop him from grabbing it anyways, slapping the lights off, and marching over to his bed. Under the faint glow of Izuku's stars, Katsuki lies under his covers with the sweater clutched against his chest, breathing in his friend's faint scent and falling asleep with the memory of being curled up with a warm body in his embrace. Izuku manages to sleep through the night thanks to the drugs, but when he wakes up, the light in his room is dim. It must be early morning, then. Inko is still asleep, looking rather uncomfortable in her chair. Izuku can't see a clock without turning his head, but thankfully his phone is still on his bed. When he turns it on, the time reads 5:53 a.m., he sighs and lets his hand fall, instead choosing to stare up at the ceiling. The pain medications must be starting to wear off because his head isn't so foggy anymore, but his throat is aching terribly. He doesn't dare try and speak again. For a while, he tries to go back to sleep, but when that proves to be a fruitless endeavor, he goes back to his phone. Class 1A has a group chat. That's the one with the most unread messages, so he checks it first. A lot of the earlier messages are just his classmates' confusion and panic, especially when the mall got evacuated, but the more recent ones are well wishes to him. Kakin apparently updated them all on his condition after he left yesterday, so that at least seems to have eased the worst of their panic. He types out a quick thank you, not expecting the response since it's so early in the morning, before checking his other messages. Miria, Tamaki, Nejire, Shinsu, even Haru's Yuku isn't sure how they found out, but he makes sure to send them all a message letting them know that he's okay. His eyes land on All Might's name. He hesitates. The man probably isn't even awake, but if he is. Midoriya 6:15 a.m. Hi Izuku doesn't expect a response so quickly. Toshinori 6:17 a.m. Young Midoriya. What are you doing awake so early? You should be resting. Midoriya 6:18 a.m. So should you. The three-dotted bubble appears for a few seconds, then vanishes. After a long moment, it reappears. Toshinori 6:20 a.m. I haven't slept too well these past few nights. Toshinori 6:21 a.m. Chio-san told us what happened yesterday. What you said. Izuku swallows, instantly regretting it when his throat protests. Midoriya 6:22 a.m. All Might, Toshinori 6:22 a.m. Yes, young Midoriya. Midoriya 6:22 a.m. Shigaraki-sensei is all for one. Toshinori 6:23 a.m. I know. Nothing comes after that. The typing bubble appears and disappears a few times, but still nothing. Izuku stares blankly up at the ceiling again. He feels. He doesn't know. Lost? Confused. But mostly scared. Yeah, he's really scared. Midoriya 6:27 AM. What happens now? Toshinori 6:28 AM. We're going to have a meeting today. Toshinori 6:29 AM. Me, Sukaki-kun, Nedzu-san, and Chio-san. We're all going to meet with you and your mother to discuss things further. Midoriya 6:30 AM. Oh. Midoriya 6:30 AM. I'm glad I get to see you. Toshinori 6:32 AM. I've already visited, actually. I met your mother too. She's very kind. I haven't been able to stay for very long, though. You were rushed to the nearest hospital after the attack, but you were too unstable to move to a more secure location, so we've been having pro-heroes patrolling constantly. Midoriya 6:32 AM. Really? Toshinori 6:34 AM. Yup. Aizawa-kun and President Mick were here not long ago. Vlad King is probably patrolling in the hallway right outside your room. The heroes in the area are on high alert. I think I even saw hawks flying around. Midoriya 6:34 AM. No way. Toshinori 6:35 AM. Yes way. Midoriya 6:35 AM. Are lying. Toshinori 6:35 AM. I am a man of my word. Midoriya 6:36 AM. But his hero agency is in Kyushu, that's so far away. Toshinori 6:36 AM. He is very fast. Izuku lets out a soundless, airy laugh. It's more of a huff than anything. Regardless, he smiles down at his phone fondly. He's pretty sure All Might is just messing with him to make him feel better. Still, all these heroes patrolling the hospital just to keep him safe? He feels both flattered and guilty. Midoriya 6:37 AM. Where are you, then? Toshinori 6:37 AM. I'm keeping an eye on the lobby. Toshinori 6:38 AM. Your friend Bakugo keeps popping up out of nowhere, both with and without his mother. I have told him many times that visiting hours are limited, and yet he still appears seemingly out of thin air. Toshinori 6:38 AM. He is very persistent. You have good friends. Midoriya 6:38 AM. I miss them. Toshinori 6:39 AM. You'll see them soon. Toshinori 6:39 AM. You should go back to sleep now, though. We'll be meeting you at noon. Izuku's a bit disheartened, but reluctantly agrees. There's still no new messages in the class group chat, so he spends the next few minutes scrolling through his social media. Surprisingly, he's one of the top stories. With the popularity the League of Villains got after USJ and Hazu, plus Izuku's very public introduction as his new healer in training during the sports festival, not to mention the numerous witnesses there were to the attack, he supposes he shouldn't be so surprised that the incident at the mall made the news. There's an outcry of shock and concern for not only him, but other healers too. Izuku sighs and puts down his phone. He doesn't want to think about public or social repercussions from this. For once, he's happy to leave that to the heroes. He doesn't expect to, but he ends up sleeping for a few more hours. Inko is the one to wake him up, gently telling him that he needs to try eating some breakfast. That is an ordeal of its own. The nurses give him more pain meds, but his throat still protests painfully whenever he swallows. It's a struggle just to keep himself from choking. His esophagus wasn't damaged at all, but it's like the muscles in his throat are just refusing to cooperate with him. After managing a few sips of his breakfast smoothie, and if liquid hurts this much, he can't imagine what eating solid food will be like. He stops. Inko looks like she wants to protest, but the nurse tells her to let him take it slow. Things are kind of quiet for around half an hour after that. Now that his classmates are awake, they practically spam him with condolences and apologies for not being there for him. He brushes them off, not wanting to sound dismissive but not wanting to cause any more worry on his behalf. If he's being entirely honest, he kind of downplays his injuries, carefully not mentioning anything about his current inability to speak. A few of his friends try calling him, including Todoroki, but he makes up some excuse about not being allowed to talk on his phone. He just does his best to reassure them, all through their group chat, promising to be back on his feet in no time. Dr. Nishita and Recovery Girl soon return to check up on him. They check his vitals, change his bandages which hurts and ask how he's feeling. Fine, he supposes, but still pretty tired. That's normal, they tell him, just his body focusing on healing itself. I would like to keep you here for another night just to monitor you, Dr. Nishita says to both Izuku and his mother, but we've done all we can through surgery. Now all there's left to do is rest until you're completely healed. Recovery Girl. He looks at the older woman. He seems to have enough strength now for you to use your quirk. Recovery Girl nods. I agree. However, once I use it, he'll no doubt be sleeping for the rest of the day, and there's a couple of things we need to discuss beforehand. Ah, yes, Dr. Nishita says, I'll leave you to that then. He bids Izuku goodbye and walks out of the room. There's some brief muttering outside in the hallway, then Detective Tsukaki, Principal Netsu, and All Might, in his normal form, enter. Inko immediately straightens up and Izuku tries to as well, but he ends up needing Recovery Girl's help and a few extra pillows to sit him up in the bed. Izuku isn't sure what to expect. Principal Netsu will probably start by politely apologizing to his mother, who will probably be confused about All Might's presence, who will probably focus more on Izuku than on the matter at hand. But none of that happens. Inko actually already seems to be familiar with the three other adults, which he guesses makes sense. Principal Netsu probably spoke with his mother during his day and a half of unconsciousness. Detective Tsukaki too, seeing as Izuku is a victim of a villain attack. All Might he isn't too sure about, but Inko doesn't look at him too oddly, so she's probably still under the guise that he's one of Recovery Girl's colleagues. So they get right into discussing the future. Since it's now clear that the League of Villains is after him, the obvious solution would be to implement some sort of protection plan. Tsukaki begins by suggesting that there be 24/7 protection around their home enforced by both police and local heroes, as well as an updated security system in their house. A bolt of panic hits Izuku at this, and for a moment he's scared that this means he won't be able to go to anymore, but Netsu quickly eases his fears. The principal already had a couple of underground heroes loosely keeping an eye on him on his way home after All Might told him about Shigaraki's interest, but now he'll be having more secure protection. Whenever he's traveling between and home, a couple of heroes, which may include his teachers, will be shadowing him. Personally, I wouldn't be too worried about someone attacking him then, All Might says. I never see him leave the school alone, and I have no doubt that he'll have a large group of friends wanting to walk him home after school once he's recovered. It seems to reassure Inko a bit. However, this also means that, for the sake of his safety, they advise him not to leave his house or for any reasons other than traveling. Which means no more shopping trips, no more long runs in the park, not that he's had much time for those lately anyway. Still, his sudden lack of freedom leaves a bitter taste in the back of his mouth. He's a 15-year-old boy. He should be able to go hang out at the mall with his friends without having to worry about being kidnapped or turned to dust by villains. If the adults take any notice of his displeasure, they don't mention it. All they're focused on is how they're going to keep him safe, which he's grateful for, of course. But he can't help but think back to some of his earlier anxieties, the ones that whisper in the back of his mind that they're only doing this because of his quirk. All Might is only nice to him because he needs his quirk. Shigaraki tried to take him for his quirk. The heroes are only protecting him now because of his quirk. That just because he was born with the power to heal, that turns him into something desirable, something that needs to be protected, but it has nothing to actually do with him and who he is as a person. Everything's just too overwhelming right now. The adults are still talking, still working out the logistics, but Izuku has long since stopped paying attention. It's hard to do so when his mind is starting to get foggy again from the pain meds. He's tired and upset and he doesn't want to think about this anymore. He just wants to go back to sleep. Preferably forever, although he feels bad for thinking that the second after he thinks it. Finally, Recovery Girl notices his fatigue. "If that's all," she says, interrupting Principal Nezu, "then I think it's time we left Midoriya-kun alone to rest." Tsukaki's eyes widen, straightening up. "Right. Of course. My apologies, Midoriya-kun. You're probably really tired still. I'll get out of your hair now." He nods at Inko. "Principal Nezu-san and I will work on getting this set up as quickly as possible. There shouldn't be any problems, but I'll call you just in case. You have my number, right?" As they stand up to leave, Principal Nezu waddles over to the side of Izuku's bed. A furry paw slides over his hand. "I didn't get the chance to earlier, but I'd like to formally apologize for what has happened to you, Midoriya-kun," the principal says, voice soft. "I know this may all seem very overwhelming and frightening, and you've gone through so much more suffering than any student of ever should, but you have been incredibly brave." Izuku blinks tiredly. "Brave? He doesn't feel very brave. And even though you're training to be a healer," Nezu continues, "you acted as a true hero that day. I'm very proud of you." The confusion must show on his face because Tsukaki steps forward too. What he's trying to say is you did the right thing, he says. You stayed calm and didn't panic in the face of a villain. You were smart enough to analyze the situation and keep Shigaraki talking, even though your instincts were probably telling you to either run or fight. Of course, that fact that you got so severely injured is terrible and you should never have been put into a situation like that, but compared to what could have happened? The Kashi ward was packed that day. If Shigaraki had gone on a rampage, I can't imagine how many casualties there would have been. Izuku stares wide-eyed at the detective as he gently places a hand on his leg, gazing at him earnestly. You knowingly sacrifice yourself to save others. He smiles. I'd say that makes you a hero in my eyes, at least. Mine too, All Might says, and Principal Nezu agrees. Izuku slowly glances between them, his sluggish mind struggling to process. Him? A hero? He wasn't trying to be one. He was just desperately trying to think of a way to get out of that horrible situation without him or anyone else dying. It didn't feel heroic at all. It was terrifying. He wants to tell them that, but he can't, so instead he just nods mutely. They smile and leave after bidding him, and his mother, goodbye. Izuku kind of wishes he could have talked to All Might a bit more and preferably in private, but that would be kind of difficult with the way Inko is constantly hovering over him, so he supposes he'll have to settle for texting for now. Recovery Girl helps him lie back and get settled more comfortably, since using her quirk will no doubt make him fall asleep. For a few moments, though, she simply gazes at him with a solemn expression. He blinks curiously. Finally, she sighs and leans over. I know it was the right thing to do, she murmurs as she kisses his forehead, but please don't make self-sacrifice a habit of yours. My old heart can't take it. He only has time to feel a flash of guilt before he falls unconscious once more. It's the middle of the night, when the wave finally comes crashing down on him. Despite being nearly 3 days late, the panic and fear that overwhelms and threatens to drown him is no less fresh. At least this time, thanks to Tamaki, he knows that this is a panic attack. Unlike last time, however, this panic attack is nearly completely silent. It's not to say that he doesn't sob uncontrollably, because he most certainly does, but his sobs are noiseless, nothing more than breathless pants and wheezes that tear their way out of his lungs as tears pour down his face. He whimpers and cries, but there's no sound to it, just the raspy wheezing of air rapidly filling and expelling from his lungs. It feels incomplete, unsatisfying to cry without sound. At least there's still a chest for him to sob into. He isn't even sure whose it is too broad to be his mother's, but there's no way Tamaki could be here with him. It doesn't matter, though. The physical comfort of being pressed against a body, of having a strong arm wrapped tightly around his back, is enough of an anchor for him to focus on, something that he can follow back to the real world. It takes a while, but eventually he manages to stop choking on perfectly good oxygen. Sniffling, he keeps his face buried into whoever's shoulder he's crying on and struggles to calm his racing heart. A hand gently scratches the back of his head. "Midoriya-kun?" A low, familiar voice rumbles. Blinking in surprise, Izuku pulls away. The room is dark, but there's a dim light coming from an old lamp on his nightstand, illuminating the face of Aizawa. The man is sitting on his bed in front of him, gazing at him with thinly veiled concern in his eyes. "You alright, kid?" Aizawa asks quietly. Izuku sniffles again and nods rapidly, suddenly feeling extremely embarrassed. He can't believe he just cried all over his teacher. As if reading his thoughts, Aizawa shakes his head. "It's fine, kid, relax. You're allowed to cry, especially considering what happened." He reaches over and grabs a tissue for him from the nightstand. Izuku takes it gratefully, feeling a little self-conscious, blowing his nose right in front of his teacher. He shoots a curious glance at the empty chair Inko was sitting in. "I managed to convince her to go home and get some sleep," Aizawa says in way of explanation. He puts a hand on Izuku's chest, gently pushing. "You should lie back down. Don't strain yourself." Izuku obediently settles back into the pillows, even though he doesn't feel that tired. For once he doesn't feel groggy at all and the fuzziness is gone from his mind. He then notices the lack of 4 or any other tubes in his arms. No more pain meds. That's probably why he finally panicked now. He was having a nightmare, he remembers. He didn't have any while he was drugged up to his gills, since he was more unconscious rather than asleep, but he had one tonight. He isn't quite sure what it was about, but when he tries to recall it, all he gets is a flash of a terrifying grin and blood-red eyes before he violently shoves those thoughts away. He doesn't need to remember to know who his nightmare was about. Without the pain meds, he's more aware of the horrible ache in his throat. His crying must have aggravated it, because even swallowing sends a spike of discomfort through his muscles. He misses the numbness. Why did they stop giving him? Wait a minute. His eyes widen. Recovery girl used her quirk on him. She healed him, but why can't he talk? He reaches up to feel his neck, carefully poking at tender but ultimately pain-free muscles. Aizawa immediately pulls his hand away. Don't why? Why? Why not why, can't he? Izuku bolts into a sitting position again, desperately trying to ask Aizawa what's wrong, but all that escapes his lips is a raspy wheeze. Aizawa claps his large hand over his mouth, forcing him to stop. No, kid, don't talk. Stop, Aizawa says in a firm tone, you are going to hurt yourself. Izuku clutches at the man's wrists, tears stinging his eyes. He doesn't understand. He should be okay now, right? Why isn't he better? Is this going to be permanent? Midoriya-kun. Calm down. Aizawa orders, his voice loud and cutting in the thick silence of the night. It's going to take a while before your voice is back to normal. The doctor said there's scarring on part of your vocal cords, but they said that with speech therapy you're going to get better, okay? You'll be fine. Izuku's scrambled mind struggles to process Aizawa's words. His throat feels numb and heavy and paralyzed, and it scares him. He clings to Aizawa's wrist like a lifeline, sniffling and gasping quietly as the tears return. Aizawa appears frustrated for a moment, then turns and starts looking for something at the end of his bed. His hand pulls away from Izuku's mouth, leaving the boy's fingers grasping for empty air. Thankfully, Aizawa returns a few seconds later, pushing something into his hands. Here, he says, gesturing to the medical folder, you understand this stuff a lot better than I do. He opens the folder and points at a couple of pictures. See? It's an X-ray of your throat. No, it's not. It's obviously an image from a laryngoscopy. The fact that Aizawa even thought it was an X-ray is so absurd that it startles a wet snort out of Izuku. Aizawa briefly looks bewildered by his reaction, then glances back down at the folder. They took it after Recovery Girl used her quirk so they could see how much scarring there is. They said it's only on the, front part? It comes out sounding like a question. Aizawa looks so uncharacteristically out of his depth here that it makes Izuku momentarily forget his panic, instead letting out a little amused wheeze. He looks down at the folder through teary eyes. Just like when he was saving Kendo, or when he was analyzing which veins and arteries Shigaraki's quirk would affect and how long he would have before he bled out. It's always easier to think of these things from a medical perspective. It's logical, there's no scary emotions here, just straight facts. His rattled mind slowly eases out as he reads his file. Unsurprisingly, most of the muscles along the column of his throat where Shigaraki's fingers were resting were severely damaged, as well as where his thumb lay. Thanks to the reparative surgery, however, that's mostly just scar tissue at this point. Actually, it seems like his whole throat is made up of scar tissue now. There was minor damage to his trachea and larynx, which is no doubt why he had so much trouble speaking and breathing after the attack. When he looks at the pictures from his laryngoscopy, he can see the severe scarring on one side of his vocal cords. Keyword 1. He feels almost dizzy with relief. In the back of his mind, he wonders if the damage to his larynx came from Shigaraki's pointer finger. The placement seems right, now that he thinks about it. If that finger had been any higher. No, don't think about that. This can be fixed. He just needs what Aizawa told him, time and speech therapy. Right now, one side of his vocal cords doesn't have the strength to properly rub against the other side, which is why he can't make a sound, but that can be fixed, muscles can be trained, and scar tissue can fade over time. He'll be okay. Sniffling, he looks up and gives Aizawa a wobbly smile. The man lets out a sigh of relief. See, I knew you would understand this stuff better than I did, he huffs, shifting over so he can sit beside him. He arches a brow, eyeing the file quizzically. What the hell is a sternocleidomastoid muscle anyway? He stumbles over the long word clumsily, and probably on purpose, but it makes Izuku smile anyway. He lets out a long, shaky exhale just to stabilize the rest of his nerves before grabbing his phone from the nightstand. He types out his response, it's the big muscle that helps your head turn. Reaching up, he turns Aizawa's chin with a finger, then taps said muscle on his neck. Aizawa grunts and Izuku points back at one of the pictures in the folder, typing, the external jugular vein lays on top of it, so mine got partially destroyed, but my sternocleidomastoid muscle protected my internal jugular vein as well as my carotid artery from being damaged. Oh, Aizawa bluntly says after he reads. That would have been bad. Izuku nods and that doesn't hurt so much anymore thanks to his mentor's quirk, and turns back to the page with the pictures from his laryngoscopy. Also, that's not an X-ray, that's a laryngoscopy. He looks up at Aizawa, who blinks slowly in return. They put a camera in my throat. Oh, Aizawa says again, fun. It's clear that he doesn't really understand the medical mumbo-jumbo in the folder. So Izuku takes pity on him and sets it down on the nightstand. Aizawa watches him silently for a moment. He hasn't moved from where he's sitting next to Izuku. This bed is really only made for one person, so he's kind of taking up a lot of space. Thankfully, though, Izuku is on the smaller side, so he's able to squeeze next to the man as he settles back down against his pillows. Neither of them say anything for a few minutes. A silence that's neither comfortable nor uncomfortable fills the air, only interrupted by the occasional noise from the hallway. Izuku isn't quite sure what to do with himself. If he wasn't so tired, he might be more flustered about being pressed so close to his teacher and personal hero. But now he just waits for something to happen. Aizawa's arm shifts. Izuku doesn't realize what's happening until it wraps around him, and pulls him closer to the man's side. Confused, he glances up, but Aizawa isn't looking at him. His mouth is pressed in a flat line. I suppose there isn't much of a point in me asking how you are. The greenhead can feel his low voice rumbling in his chest next to his ear. He blinks, processes, then slowly shakes his head. He isn't sure how he would reply if Aizawa did ask that question. It's not like he can say that he's fine. The panic attack he just had would say otherwise. Besides, just because he's going to be fine doesn't mean that he's fine right now. Izuku sniffles and, after a moment, hesitantly snuggles a bit deeper into Aizawa's side. A villain put him in a hospital. He doesn't have to be fine. Another long pause. Then, I know you probably don't want to hear this, Aizawa grunts. But I'm going to say it anyway. I'm sorry. Izuku frowns. Then wiggles his arm free and types in his phone, I don't understand why people keep apologizing. It's no one's fault but Shigaraki's. Aizawa reads, is silent for a moment, then huffs, all heroes have a guilt complex. It's basically part of the job description. Izuku slowly turns his head up, ignoring the uncomfortable pulling sensation in his neck, and gives Aizawa a very unimpressed look. Don't look at me like that, brat. A hand on his face pushes his head back down. Aizawa heaves a heavy sigh, and Izuku's head moves with his chest. I'm just saying, he continues, I'm sorry that this happened to you. And I'm sorry that I wasn't there to protect you. Izuku wishes he could make a grumbly noise. Not your job. It is my job, Aizawa says, firmly enough to make Izuku hesitate. It is. Both as a hero and your teacher, I should have been able to keep you safe. But we were outside of school. Doesn't matter. Isn't it illogical to feel guilty about something you had no control over? Remember what I just said about heroes and guilt complexes, kid? Izuku rolls his eyes and huffs, cheek squished against Aizawa's chest. After another pause, he types, I'm sorry. For what? Aizawa asks. For making everyone worry. They were really freaking out. I feel bad. He clicks on the messaging app and scrolls up in the group chat, showing him the panicked messages from his classmates a couple of days ago. Aizawa pushes his phone down. Kid, quit worrying about everyone else for once, he grunts, then adds, isn't it illogical to feel guilty about something you had no control over? Izuku wrinkles his nose childishly. They talk for a little bit longer after that, just simple, idle conversation in the dark of the night. With his exhaustion from his panic attack and Aizawa's warmth pressed beside him, Izuku feels himself growing more and more sleepy by the minute. At one point, a large hand finds his hair and starts gently scratching. Izuku's eyes immediately flutter shut. He's out like a light within the minute. When Izuku wakes up again, he isn't sure what time it is. But he can hear the hushed voices of his mother and Aizawa speaking softly. Thinking about discharging him. That's good. I know he'll be happy. But I don't want him going back to school too soon. Don't worry about it. He can take the rest of the semester off. Not much happens in the last week anyway. There is something else we need to discuss. I don't know if he mentioned it to you yet, but the summer camp. Yes. I know things are kind of uncertain right now, but I think he'll be safest if he comes with us. It'll be in a secure location and he'll be surrounded by pro heroes and heroes in training.